Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Is my sound good and video good? Good morning. Good morning. Okay, good morning. Excellent. Okay, Doug's in. Jesse's in. Okay, we've got almost everyone here. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay, can you all see the screen I'm presenting as well? I've got our documents pulled up. Good morning, Dorothy. How's it going, everyone? Okay, you can all see my documents. So we missed last week, right? It was Memorial Day.
Story of one of our graduates.
So
her name
we're going to
is,
have to kind of like
Short.
try and remember 2 weeks back to what we were talking about. Okay, so I have our Google Classroom notes pulled up. I hope you can all see here. These are the notes that we took last week, right? On the 18th of May. That's how long ago it was. It was 2 weeks ago. It looks like we took quite a bit of notes. So I just want to review those notes. We've got 9 pages of notes that I took of what we talked about. Let's review them just a little bit so we can get back in the headspace of what we've been talking about. Okay, Foundations 2. Good morning, Alicia. Foundations 2, right? We're mostly talking about external causes of disease for the first half of this class. Okay, the very beginning part, we talked the 6 exterior excesses, right? The Liu Qi, the environmental Qi. How our bodies can be out of sync with the change in the environment as the seasons change can be its own cause of illness, right? If you look at the Foundations 2 material broadly, if we consider the topic for the whole course, basically we could say that Foundations 2 is investigating all causes of disease, whether they be external or internal, right? So the external cause of disease, the first one we talk about is 6 exterior excesses. After we talk about the 6 exterior excesses, we talk about the Shanghai Line and the Wenbing Line, different models of whether a wind disease comes with cold or does wind disease come with heat, right? So first half of this course is just exterior causes of disease. The second half of this course is all the interior causes of disease, right? So we're not getting into, right, this course is not about diagnosing the diseases. That's in Diagnosis 1 and Diagnosis 2. This course, I'm just giving you the basic foundation, vocabulary, theory, so that when we do the diagnosis, you'll be able to use the correct terminology in explaining the pattern of disharmony, right? So Foundations 2 goes along with Diagnosis 1 for this reason, right? Foundations 2, we need the vocabulary. Then in Diagnosis 1, we have the framework so we can understand how does one go from tongue, pulse, asking questions, inquiry, listening, smelling, organize that data, come up with a diagnosis. From the diagnosis leads to treatment principle, treatment plan, and finally a treatment, right? In Foundations 2, we're all the way back here. We just need the vocabulary. So that's just to reorient us where we are talking about theory here, right? It looks like I kind of reviewed that. What is a treatment principle, right? What are diagnoses here? We've been talking about yin yang and 5 elements as well, that yin yang and 5 elements are like the basic framework. They're the most basic elements of our theory. If we understand the yin yang and 5 elements very well, if we can speak using the language of yin yang and 5 elements, everything else will be pretty easy. So I try and weave that into all the lectures.
Are you able to email us those notes?
Yeah, did you guys not receive this one? I'll send it out again.
Okay.
Yeah, if I didn't send it, for sure.
Yeah, I didn't receive it either. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, of course. Well, so we'll review it here, and then I'll do that on the first break, okay? So when we take our break at around 10:15, I'll make sure you all get these review notes. Okay, so we talk a little bit about all disease in Chinese medicine comes from a lack of free flow, right? And then we have the Chinese quote, 通之不通，不通之通, right? Where there is pain, there is no free flow. Where there's free flow, there's no pain. A lot of people think that this saying only relates to orthopedics or like elbow pain, shoulder pain. If I'm in pain, it means my chi's not moving, right? I need to go move my body, stretch my body so I won't be in pain. It not only applies to pain, right? This is the entire model for all of Chinese medicine. All patterns of disharmony fundamentally stem from some kind of lack of free flow, right? A lack of free flow can be manifested in too much causing a blockage, right? Excess, or not enough, resulting from another lack of free flow. There's kind of a lump in the orbit of the circulation of our qi or our blood, any of our body fluids, right? So tongzi bu tong, wu tongzi tong. This is a very important statement. It's considered a statement of fact in Chinese medicine, right? If you think about Chinese medicine, it's almost like algebra, right? The theory, the units of the theory build together to form a system, and this system has logic, okay? These statements like tongzi bu tong, wu tongzi tong, they're like proofs, right? We rely on these statements as evidence. We use them to drive our theory, okay? And there are a lot of statements like this. And so when you're a student, you start just collecting these bits of theory, but eventually they all come together, right? They all form a broader view of what Chinese medicine is, right? It's the same idea as running water cleans itself, right? If our circulation is complete, we really won't have any places where something's getting stuck. We won't have any patterns of disharmony. 6 functions of qi we reviewed from Foundations 1, right? Transform, transport, warm, protect, hold, and raise. Here we're getting more into, because it was week 2, we need to start addressing and speaking about external disease cause, right? So the key sign and symptom, that's why I highlighted this, underlined this. Key sign and symptom for all exterior disease, right? Everything we talk about for about the first 6 weeks of this class will all be focused around one symptom. That's simultaneous chills and fever. Okay, it sounds strange, or it sounds simple when I bring it up right off the bat. Simultaneous chills and fever, and you're going, okay, what is that? What is simultaneous? Simultaneous chills and fever, right, as we've reviewed, is just that strange feeling you get in your skin, especially maybe in your neck or upper back, when you're just getting the onset of an upper respiratory infection, right? When you're just getting the onset of a cold or flu, when you're just getting the onset of something that will change very rapidly into maybe a headache, maybe sweating, maybe some fever, but also chills at the same time. You feel too hot, but then when you go outside, you feel too cold. You want to shut the window even though you're sweating, right? And maybe you're fatigued at the same time. Your body's aching. You have a slight sore throat or a slight stuffy nose. This is the very beginning of exterior invasion. Of what kind? Could be any kind. But at that point, we know it's wind, right? We know it's an exterior wind invasion. Could be a wind heat. Could be a wind cold. Could be a wind dry, wind damp. Summer heat, right? Invasion. Once we get that step further of what kind of wind disease is this, that's the material we're talking about now, is the 6 exterior evils, right? Cannot forget that these chills and fever, they have to be simultaneous, meaning you have to be the patient must be experiencing them at the same time and in the same place. Their skin, that's where this happens. It happens in their skin. It's like goosebumps. Too sensitive in the skin. They want to wear a scarf or they want to cover up, right? They don't want to go outside. If the patient is sweating and they have the chills and fever, it means the yin qi is leaking out, right? This sweat, which normally the pores are contracted and the skin of the body, the exterior envelope of the body, the wei qi, right? Our defensive qi protects us from wind, protects us from cold. But if we have exterior wind invasion, it blocks our wei qi. The wei qi blocked means the pores are no longer regulated. It means the sweat can come out easily. So this is dangerous, actually, because in many febrile diseases, as I'm sure you guys know from reviewing the notes and studying some of this already, one of the main risks, or even one of the main ways that somebody can contract a fatal condition, is if they have a serious febrile disease that lasts for a long time. The oversweating will tax the body in such a way that it begins to affect other systems, they may generate other diseases, other comorbidities. The pathogen that was originally on the surface can move deeper in, cause other problems in the body, even in the organs, right? Chinese medicine has a very robust and developed theoretical framework of how exterior disease transforms to other interior diseases, right? Western medicine this is not their strong point. This is not something that they focus on very much. Upper respiratory infection, it's really upper respiratory infection, right? They don't see the same pathogen as something that transforms to cause other problems all over the body. In Chinese medicine, we really do, right? We understand how a common cold or flu, for example, in the autumn time, can transform into something like a low backache, excessive urination, fatigue, cold body, lack of appetite, even depression in the winter time, right? After the fall time, somebody has a wind disease, this wind, which isn't literally wind stuck in their body, right? It's not literally that, but it's characterized by the quality of wind. This wind can move in the body, cause other problems, right? It's really just talking about what? How when homeostasis, when our body's ability to maintain integrity becomes challenged, or if we generate some illness, right? That illness can cause problems in other systems, which have a cascade effect, right? So in Chinese medicine, we say, I think I talked about this in the last class too, that there are kind of different levels of practitioners and different levels of treatments, right? We mentioned the three different kinds of practitioners. A high-level practitioner knows how to treat before the illness has started, right? Before the illness has started. Prevention in Chinese medicine is the gold standard, right? If the patient gets sick, it's already something that the doctor didn't do right. Why? Because actually the doctor's job in Chinese medicine is to model conduct, is to model what is appropriate conduct to maintain this human integrity, right? The proper way to sleep, eat, breathe, move, right? Manage emotions even. These are all things that the doctor traditionally would teach the patient, right? If the doctor's not doing their job, the patient doesn't understand how important this is, right? The doctor needs to fix that. That's the doctor's job, is make sure the patient understands, help the patient learn how to take care of themselves. In English, there's the saying, right? We want to teach a man to fish, not sell him fish. Meaning the high-level doctor knows how to train the patient, take responsibility for their own health, right? The effect of that is very broad. Not only does it affect the patient and their ability to maintain their health, also affects a society, right? It affects a family. It affects it affects everything. If people take responsibility for their own actions, if they want to take care of themselves so that they can contribute, so that the society is better, they're not dragging everything down, right? Tongzi butong, butongzi tong. If we're each individual units and every individual unit is being managed appropriately, we won't have big problems in the society. This is Chinese medicine's idea of how Chinese medicine doctors actually make society a better place too, right? So high-level doctor, prevention, right? The middle level, the patient gets sick, but they're only in the early stage of getting sick. They just got sick and they came straight to the doctor, and the doctor knows exactly what to tell them, right? In this case that we're talking about, those simultaneous chills and fever, okay? Exterior disease always begins with the simultaneous chills and fever. Always does. Even if it's only for 12 hours, right? A patient who may be very weak, have deficiency, lung qi deficiency, wei qi deficiency, spleen qi deficiency, kidney qi deficiency, right? Any qi deficiency in those organs could cause an exterior invasion to move faster, okay? Because I'm sure, and we're still reviewing here, but you guys will remember in the Diagnosis 1 class that goes with this Foundations 2 class, and also we talked about this somewhat in Foundations 2, I think last week, the state of our zheng qi, right? The state of our zheng qi. Let's start there with the notes for today. Right? Zheng qi. Who can remember what is the translation or definition of zheng qi? Anybody? Upright. Very good. Upright. Very good. Very good. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Correct. It's upright qi. Okay. But we need to unpack that concept. What does this mean, right? What do we mean upright? So like I'm standing up straight, or I'm very tall. If I'm not very tall, I don't have much upright qi. Not exactly, right? It's not that. It's upright symbolically, right? Meaning my ability to maintain kind of upright in the face of something trying to press me down, right? Over time. It's like how I'm resisting gravity, right? In my environment, we know there's many pathogens in the environment, right? If I go outside, there's some wind or there's some cold, antipathogenic. Very good, Dorothy. That's right. What this means is my ability to maintain homeostasis. This is the body's ability to maintain homeostasis, right? Homeostasis means maintaining the normal integrity, like temperature, the circulation of blood, normal sensation even, right? All the normal functions we'll consider part of homeostasis. How are my bowel movements? How's my urination? How's my appetite? How's my sleep? How are my emotions? All these things and so many more things are going to contribute to my homeostasis, right? Chinese medicine understands every angle of that situation, right? Body's ability to maintain homeostasis, body's ability to prevent the invasion or infection from pathogens, right? And those pathogens include, of course, the 6 exterior evils, right, as we talked about. And we'll list them here. Wind, cold, heat, damp, dry, summer heat. Okay, and we explained, I think, last week, or not last week, the week before last week, we explained that those 6 exterior evils are actually connected to the calendar. Okay, those 6 exterior evils, they change with the environment, right? So we talked about how the 6 exterior evils really just mean the qi in the environment, right? But the qi in the environment is actually very complex. Not only is the calendar affected, does the calendar affect it, but also the location, right? So in old kind of ancient Chinese medicine, we say the feng shui. The feng shui also affects the nature of the pathogenic qi outside. If it's the summertime in Death Valley, California, right, versus the summertime in British Columbia, Canada, right? These are very different places. It's the same time, both the summertime, summer solstice, right? In British Columbia, it will be sunny, it will be warm, but guess what? It will be moist, it will be green in the summer solstice because there's more water there, right? In Death Valley, if you go during the summer solstice, it's very dangerous. It's very dry. It's very hot. It's not hospitable for human life, right? So the calendar will affect the nature of the environment, but also the feng shui, right? And we're introducing these concepts here, but later on in your education as a TCM practitioner, we'll get actually very specific, right? There's other classes that I teach in the Huangdi Neijing course, in the Shanghai Line course, in any of the classical theory courses. One of the ways that I was trained was to see the calendar as having specific qualities of qi inside, right? So we can look at the month, we can look at the day, we can look at the year, we can even look at the hour and calculate. We can do a calculation. It's very logical, actually. What is the quality of the qi? How will this affect certain kinds of patients versus others, right? What kinds of illness will give rise during those kind of conditions, right? It's even in the Neijing. There's one section in the Neijing called Wu Yun Liu Qi, right? Maybe you've heard about this. Huang Di Neijing, the special chapter, the Wu Yun Liu Qi, right? So this is like the 5 movements and the 6 qi, predicting the nature of diseases based on the year and time of year that they come, that they arise, right? So this actually is a very sophisticated science in Chinese medicine. So anyway, in Deng, if we want to look at our textbooks, which I also pulled up before we're done reviewing, just wanted to touch base there. Right, in our textbooks, we're looking at this chapter, and this was the chapter I've suggested that you read. Disease cause pattern identification, chapter 6. Okay, you can see in my version of Deng, this is page 185. Okay. We have talked and introduced the meaning of what 6 excesses are. We've talked about the meaning of pattern identification, definitely in diagnosis, right? A lot. We talked about that. And I think we started talking about wind. And we're about to start talking about cold. In Giovanni Makosha's book, the other recommended book, I'll show you the chapter we're in, okay? We're in the same, chapter has the same name. So this is also called External Causes of Disease. This is chapter 21 in Giovanni. This is page 255, right? Giovanni, his treatment of this material is rather light. He doesn't really get into the Liu Qi, the 6 exterior excesses very much. He describes something he describes the same thing that we've been talking about, right? He's talking about the body's qi and the climate. He's been talking about, the pathological effect that weather can have, equilibrium, homeostasis, basically the same things we're talking about, but he just articulates it a little bit differently, right? He's an English language author, so he has his own way of interpreting and articulating the same concepts, just like I do. He talks about how wind is related to bacteria and viruses, microbe theory, right? The Chinese medicine's idea of wind as a pathogen, as a vector, you can even say, carrying other diseases is very similar to microbe theory, but fundamentally different, right? Another thing I'm sure that we talked about that you guys remember from the lectures is I really like to emphasize where there's a philosophical difference between Chinese medicine and Western medicine, because so many of us, especially if you were educated in the United States, educated with Western science, educated anywhere in the world where the Western model is predominant at this time, then you're also educated with materialism, right? You're educated to see matter and particles as real, and anything that's not have this matter or particles as not real, right? Real. So in Chinese medicine, we don't have that dichotomy of only matter, only particles, right? My cup is solid, right? It's made of ceramics. It's got some glaze and some paint. That's all. Those are all things, right? And those are all we could take a chip off my cup and look at it under a microscope. You would see in very fine detail the structure of the particles, of the molecules, of the clays all coming together, right? And then the glaze is on the clay. And yes, we're not going to deny the reality of that. However, in Chinese medicine, reality is not limited to the particles. Reality is not limited to matter, right? In Chinese medicine, we have qi and shape, right? Yang and yin, immaterial and material, right? Not only material, right? There's also an immaterial part. So qi is considered a substance, right? And I'd say substance with quote unquote, because we don't have another English language word that can match what qi is or means, right? Other than a substance that's actually immaterial. So it's a substance that's insubstantial, right? It's kind of paradoxical. But microbe theory, why am I talking about that right now? Microbe theory, right? Bacteria and viruses, obviously particles. But wind in Chinese medicine is actually not based on particles. Wind is a type of qi, okay? So already they seem the same, But the theory is different, okay? The theory is very different. In the beginning of your education, you have to look for these places where you may be making assumptions about what it is we're describing. Don't let those assumptions continue, right? We need to learn the Chinese medicine standard, the Chinese medicine foundational logic, so that we can build the structure of Chinese medicine theory so it will function in clinic, right? If we don't build the structure of this theory correctly, when we get into clinic, we'll be confused. We won't know why the treatments are working or not working. We won't have a clear idea of how to match something like patient signs, symptoms to diagnosis, to treatment plan, right? This has to be very, very clearly outlined in your mind before you're able to move forward. So anyway, he talks about all these things. He gives a historical background for Shanghai Line. We're not there yet. We'll talk about Shanghai Line much later. He doesn't really get very much into the 6 exterior excesses themselves. That's why I'm not suggesting we use this book as the main book, okay? I want you all to be really clear about that. The main book for this class is not Giovanni. The main book for this class will be Deng, okay? Main text for this class is Deng. For the reason that Gio doesn't give as much information on the topics we cover, right? Giovanni Makosha. Giovanni is a Zhang Fu specialist, okay? That means that his book is the focus of the second half of this course, not the first half, right? Because remember, the first half is exterior disease cause. The second half is interior disease cause, okay? So when we go to interior disease cause, that will be Zhang Fu, diet, lifestyle, emotions, right? So this is really where he focuses. This is where Giovanni focuses, is Zhang Fu, diet, lifestyle, emotions. Deng focuses more on 6 exterior evils, Shanghai Line, and Wending Lun, okay? Okay, just to make it totally clear, we're almost done reviewing. Let's just scan through, see what we talk about. Strengths. We talk about wind, right? Qualities of wind. Wind is a yang evil. It's nature's opening, draining, moving without resting, changing, transforming without settling. Tends to rise. Wind tends to rise. Cause problems in the head, cause problems in the neck, upper back, okay? So different kinds of wind. Exterior wind, right? When we get cold or flu, we often get a sore neck, right? Western medicine explanation is the lymph nodes are swollen, right? And it's not incorrect, right? And Chinese medicine agrees, said, yes, the lymph nodes will be swollen because the Wei Qi is stagnant, right? And the Wei Qi circulation also impacts the movement of fluids in the body, such as the lymphatic system, right? Lymph is also white, which is the same color as the Wei Qi. So there's already some connections, right? Chinese medicine and Western medicine can do this, but we have to have them very clearly in their own logic in order for them to interact, right? That cannot use the Western medicine logic in Chinese medicine, cannot use the Chinese medicine logic in Western medicine. If we have them both clear, then they can interact, okay? So Chinese medicine, right? You get the wind invasion, cold or flu, and you have a sore neck, sore upper back. That's for exterior. But guess what? Interior wind will cause the same problem for a different reason, though. Interior wind is related to stress and the liver organ and the gallbladder organ, right? If we work all day and we're very stressed, too much work, not enough rest, not enough exercise, emotions are stagnant, we'll get a tight neck. We'll get tight shoulders, right? The organs responsible and related to this kind of stress, emotional stress, work stress, is the wood element organs. And wood element is related to wind type qi. So you can already see Chinese medicine logic gives us clear ways to understand how any sign and symptom in the body arises, where it arises from, what its characteristic will be, right? So we're talking about exterior wind, but actually important to just realize all wind in general will have these qualities. Wind governs all movement. Wind rapidly changes. Wind has no fixed location. So if I have a wind type headache, maybe it starts on the right side of my head, but then I feel now it's moved into my occiput. And then from there, I feel, oh, it's moved to the left side. Wait, now I have some shoulder pain. This is the quality of wind, right? Wind will not have a fixed location, right? Just like the wind in nature blows everywhere, right? It doesn't seem to have a, again, it's not really a material component. It's the wind is the movement itself. Even if we want to think about the molecules of the air, is it one molecule of air traveling? No, it's actually the force that's bumping the molecules into each other. One molecule bumps into the other, that one bumps into the other. And it is the bumping of all these molecules that gives the illusion or the impression of wind, right? Wind is movement, right? In Chinese medicine, wind is all movement is wind, okay? The correspondence is like this. Wind type qi, wood is the element, spring is the season, liver is the organ, sour is the flavor, warm is the temperature, and the channels will be the Jueyin Shaoyang channels. Okay, so at the highest level, this is all you need. All you need is the correspondences, and the rest you can fill in the blanks, right? That's why the textbooks in Chinese medicine are lots of tables of correspondences, signs, symptoms, you know, naming the patterns, because the skill of being a doctor is understanding the logic of how to connect these things. And once you understand the logic, all you need is the tables, all you need is the charts, and you can see everything very clearly, right? So other examples of wind, except this time internal, is like convulsions, right? Convulsions, epilepsy, seizures are also wind. Remember, wind is movement. So convulsions, seizures, right? This will be a wind type disorder, right? Disease process that wind engenders will also have these characteristics, right? When we talk about materialism, right? Now we go into symptoms. Somebody have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question about more specifically about why wind was associated more with Shaoyang and Jueyin. Like why it was in that category instead of like Taiyang.
So good question, right? So there's different ways of 6 channels, right? Good question. So 6 channels, we have the Shanghai Line organization of 6 channels based on the layers of the body, superficial to deep, right? In the Shanghai Line, it is indeed the Taiyang channels that are affected by wind first, right? But actually, if we think about it, the Taiyang channels themselves are what? What are the Taiyang channels? In terms of their correspondence with organs.
The small intestine and bladder.
That's right. Small intestine and urinary bladder. Now, small intestine and urinary bladder, right? What element does small intestine belong to? Small intestine belongs to fire element, right? Specifically, it belongs to the imperial fire versus the ministerial fire, okay? Urinary bladder element belongs to water, okay? So the Taiyang channels actually are associated with fire and water, right? Fire type qi will be heat type qi. water type qi will be cold type qi, right? So Taiyang actually more associated with heat and cold versus something like wind. So this is why it's why we have to have the framework of the theory has to be really clear. When I'm talking about wind as a type of qi and what it's associated with, it's associated with the Jueyin, right? Jueyin is wood. The Jueyin will be liver, right? Jueyin equals liver and pericardium, right? Shaoyang equals what? Gallbladder and sanjiao, right? So Jueyin Shaoyang is more the wood fire relationship, which is more the wind or the heat relationship, right? Taiyang is more heat cold, okay? This is just in terms of the way they're correlated. Shanghai Line, on the other hand, is talking about these layers of the body, superficial to deep, which are a little bit different, even though it sounds the same, even though it sounds the exact same. The 6 channels in the Shanghai Line are actually different than the 6 channels talking about the six channels that relate to the 12 main meridians, okay? So we haven't got to that point yet of talking about Shanghai Line or explaining what the Shanghai Line is. At this point, it's very important you understand that sometimes we'll use even the same terms, but depending on their context, they will have totally different meaning, right? So right now, what I'm saying about how wind is more related to Jueyin Shaoyang in terms of these correspondences, so far we haven't talked about anything pathological, right? Wind corresponds with the Jueyin Shaoyang, but it doesn't mean that wind causes disease in the Jueyin Shaoyang, okay? Actually, the wind comes out from the Jueyin Shaoyang, right? The gallbladder and the liver are the yin and yang that together produce the wood type qi, which is wind, okay? Not pathological wind. The wind in the body that is moving the qi, right? So your question leads us in a direction that shows there's some complexity here. There's some importance understanding the context, right? Does that make sense? Does my answer make sense? It's the small intestine and urinary bladder channels that get affected by exterior wind first, which is why in the Shanghai Line, Taiyang comes first. But when I'm talking about Jueyin Shaoyang related, it's not from exterior wind invasion. It's more like the cosmological correspondence of what wood element and wind qi is. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'm getting confused because in theater, Sean's been talking more about the Shanghai Line, and I'm like getting confused about separating them because it's the same terms, like you're saying.
And that will be totally normal, okay? Up front, in the first part of your, right, probably the first whole year of your education, you don't have enough experience understanding exactly how to relate with all of the terms yet. So this is a difficult thing about Chinese medicine is it's like learning a new language, right? Sometimes somebody asks you a question in a language you don't know, and you know the verb and you know the noun, but you're not sure still what they're asking you. You're like, I think he said something about the exits in the back, and it's like, no, he didn't say the exits in the back. He said, if you said something totally, oh, well, it's because you did, it's like learning a new language. So in the beginning, you will have to have a lot of patience with yourself. You'll have to be willing to know that you don't understand completely, and it's okay. So what you do in those contexts is you do exactly what you just did. You ask a good question. You ask the teacher to clarify, right? And you guys have Sean Smolinski for theater, is that right?
Yeah, a few of us do.
Okay. Yeah, he's a Shanghanlun specialist, right? So in theater, it's and I love it when you guys ask these kind of questions, because then I can help you understand how to orient yourself in the program, in the education itself. Right? It's one thing to talk about the details or read the textbooks, help you understand the textbooks, right? But it's another to help you understand how to put all this information together in your own head. So in theater and in clinic, it's important that you pay attention to what the teacher says. It's important that you try to understand everything they're talking about. But at the same time, the most important thing is really that you're just observing this practitioner practice in the way that they practice. This is the level of knowledge and skill that they have achieved over their lifetime, right? So really, to be able to understand the practitioner fully, you'll maybe never be able to do that, right? So the goal of the clinic courses is not that you like learn everything that the teacher is trying to teach you about the specific, like this treatment and that treatment. It's kind of a zoomed out view of how this person treats, how they talk, how do they interact with the patient, what points did they pick, what herbs did they pick, right? It's more zoomed out. When we do the academic studies, we get very detailed, right? And we try and define the terms. We try and apply the terms as we define them. We test your competency to see if you understand what we're talking about. In clinic, it's different. It's not, you'll never be able to master the details as well in clinic, because every teacher has their own specialty, actually. And we have to remember, Chinese medicine. Okay, Chinese medicine. Oh, let me go to our other document, because I want to write this in our notes. Chinese medicine is an art and a science. Okay, so that's kind of getting to Sean Smolinski as a practitioner. He's developed this Shanghanlun to like an art form. So he thinks about the Shanghanlun all day, and he thinks about everything in terms of Shanghanlun. Well, you guys are just beginning, right? So there's no way you can actually fully understand him, because he's talking levels beyond, right? And even if he makes it as basic as he can, it will still be levels beyond, right? Because that's his specialty. It's important for you to see that Chinese medicine in the beginning, you kind of like have to focus on the basics, the general rules, right? The basic logic, the foundations. But then as you grow as practitioners, you will find that you can take the basic logic and apply it in very different ways, in very different situations. Like Shanghanlun is kind of its own school of thought, right? And that's where Sean comes from. He's a specialist. I'm very different. I'm more of a generalist, right? And my focus is on the logic of Chinese medicine. My focus is on clarifying and showing how actually all these models relate to each other. Sean's more very focused on something very specific. So if you have trouble decoding what he's talking about, don't beat yourself up and don't worry about it. Do what you just did. Ask a good question in class to help you clarify what is the context, right? Context is the key. It is always the key, okay? The content will change depending on context in TCM. This is very, very important to understand. For example, like we just said, right? Wind can be pathological or non-pathological. Depends on what we are talking about, right? If we are talking about the wood type qi, which equals wind, which means the movement of qi and blood in the body, then Shui Yin and Shao Yang are responsible for that, okay? However, if we are talking about the layers of the body that are affected by external evil wind as a pathogen, This is a different context, right? So then we understand that external wind affects the Taiyang areas first. But it doesn't only affect the Taiyang areas, right? It just starts in the Taiyang. It starts in the upper neck, the back, the head, which is the Taiyang area. Does it make sense the way I just explained it, you guys? Are you able to follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, this is my specialty, you guys. This is my specialty, is figuring out where you guys have knots tied, and then you bring me the knot and I'll untie the knot for you, okay? This is what I'm really good at. It's part of the reason why I teach like half of your theory is you come to me with questions from other classes, right? Something you're not understanding in clinic, something you're not understanding in herbs or points or anywhere, okay? And you feel free and ask me any question, okay? My specialty, if you want to talk about what my specialty is the logic, okay? I think I told you guys that I trained with Kevin Zhu, right? With Zhu Yanzhong, who is a kind of world-leading author and writer, researcher into the Huangdi Neijing, which is kind of our seminal textbook for all of TCM theory. I studied very, very closely with him for years. Was his TA over like 15 times. I have over 1,000 pages of his lectures transcribed. His main focus was just this. His main focus was to show that TCM is logical, that the theory is very broad. And if you understand yin yang and 5 elements, you will always have a clear pathway to understand and talk about anything in TCM. Okay, the other teachers, this is not their specialty, right? Like Sean Smolinski, his specialty may be not the logic. His specialty may be this specific view of Shanghai Line and how to apply that in clinic, right? That's his specialty. For me, my specialty is this kind of research into the logic of Chinese medicine, how to make all the terms consistent, how to model the terms for you guys so that when you talk and when you think, it all makes sense, okay? Because it has to. It's not helpful if we give you a bunch of pieces of the puzzle, but none of these pieces connect. If the pieces don't connect, why give you the pieces? You'll only be confused, right? So that's my special job, is I know how to connect these pieces for you, okay? So never be afraid to ask me those kind of questions. If you don't understand or you're not following me, you're saying, oh, other teacher said like this, and I thought that meant this, but now you're saying that, and now I'm understanding that means this. I will help you put that all together, okay? So we're almost done with this. We're almost done with this review. Exterior wind signs and symptoms. I think I told you, memorize, highlight, underline this. Fever, aversion to cold, sweat, dizziness, headache, nasal congestion. These are the symptoms of an exterior invasion. So memorize that, right? If there are fever, chills simultaneous, always means exterior. This is the key. Okay, we talked about the evil and the zhengqi versus the xieqi. Same thing we talked about before. Different kinds of wind cold invasions, right? I'm gonna highlight this. And then when I send it to you, you'll get it. Wind cold exterior excess. Now we're getting more detailed. Of the wind diseases, right? Especially wind cold will be the most common one, right? Cold easily rides on the wind. Cold will stagnate our wei qi. Wind will disperse our yin qi. Remember when we talked about this earlier? We talked about the difference between sweating and no sweating, right? In a wind invasion. You probably remember it, but I don't expect you to fully understand it yet. There's 2 types. There's a wind cold exterior excess, okay, and a wind cold exterior deficiency. Big difference here in terms of a wind invasion. Exterior excess means no sweating. Simultaneous chills and fever with no sweating. Why no sweating? The excess in this case means the wei qi is strong, and when the pathogen came, it made a fight on the surface that caused all the pores to close. Because there's still plenty of qi in the wei qi, and the wei qi controls the pores. So if the wei qi is strong, pores will close, prevent the evil wind from getting in, right? But when the pores close, guess what? We also no sweating, okay? If the patient is deficient, is a wind cold exterior deficiency, zheng qi is not as strong. The patient will be sweating, okay? Sweating. So this time the wind came, and because the pores weren't, the wei qi wasn't strong, the pores opened up and the wind went in, then the wind causes everything dispersed in the blood, fluid comes out, okay? This is basically the difference in your herbs class between Ma Huang and Gui Zhi, right? Ma Huang and Gui Zhi. Ma Huang for excess induces the sweating, which is going to harmonize the exterior, kick the wind out, kick the wind cold out. Gui Zhi is also going to harmonize the wei, but it's a little gentler and it doesn't induce the sweating as much, right? Because the person's already sweating. So treatment methods for wind invasions of all kinds. Okay, wind, wind, wind. It's important to know there's only two types of wind invasion, right? There's exterior wind, but there's also B syndrome. We talked about this in foundations as well. Diagnosis 1 as well. We talked about how the two types of exterior disease will be exterior wind invasion, but also B syndrome, which basically means arthritis, right? We'll talk about that more. Different types of B syndrome. Okay, and then that was it. Okay, so let's start in on our next unit here. Let's finish wind and move on to heat because we need to cover a little ground. I'm gonna close this, but then I'm gonna send it to you on break in about 8 minutes. Okay. So in Dung. Now we'll pull up our class notes, our actual class notes. Here is the document. You all have this document, right? Foundation 2, 6 Evils A. This one I've sent you. Is that correct? You all have that one? Yes. Okay, good. That's what I thought. I thought you did. Okay, good, good, good. So this is your main document, okay? All those other notes that I send and talk about, right? I'm making here the Google Classroom notes. That's just like a running log of my dialogue and the lecture, right? But actually, this document, Foundations 2, 6 Evils A, this is like the main document where I pulled stuff directly out of the textbooks so that you don't always have to read the textbooks. You can see what it is I think is the most important thing in the textbooks, but also you do need copies of the textbooks, obviously, to study, right? So anyway, wind. We've talked about wind, internal wind, external wind analysis, Taiyang Zhongfeng versus Taiyang Shanghan, right? We talked a little bit about this. Let's move on to cold. Let's introduce a cold type qi, right? All these exterior evils are types of qi. Don't forget, right? All the exterior evils are different types of qi, meaning they are influences, factors in the environment, right? Their nature is, again, not material, but it affects the material of the body, okay? So cold is a type of qi. Let's go through the correspondences, just like we did with the wind. And I said that wind is related with wood, is related with the sour flavor, is related with the warm temperature, is related with the Jui Yin Xiao Yang, right? Cold is different, okay? Cold type qi is related with the water element, okay? Is also related with the salty flavor, is also related with the cold temperature, obviously, because qi is temperature, so cold type qi is a cold temperature. Also related with more Taiyang and Shaoyin. Why Taiyang and Shaoyin? Okay, because Taiyang Shaoyin equals which ones again? So urinary bladder and kidney, right? Urinary bladder kidney will be the Taiyang Shaoyin pair that equals what? Water element organs, okay, water element organs. So if we think about what the kidney Zang organ does, right? Kidney Zang organ stores the essence, hides the essence, right? Just like what? Just like in the winter time, right? Because that's another one we can add here is the winter season, right? Just like in the winter time, the cold outside causes everything to contract, causes everything to constrict, and will cause things to store inside. During the winter time, we should all be hiding inside, especially if it's cold out, right? And we want our storehouses full of food, full of resources, right? If you're running out of food during the winter, you're in big trouble. Winter time is for storage, right? And that's actually what cold qi makes happen. Cold qi makes everything expand or contract. Cold qi makes everything contract. Cold qi forces the yang of the body to the inside. Okay, if it's very cold outside, our yang qi will move inside to try and protect itself. The internal body will start warming up, right? But the external skin will be cold. Okay, so this is the cosmological correspondence, right? Not necessarily talking about the pathology yet, right? Cold is a pathology. If we talk about the cold type qi causes what kind of problems, right? Cold type qi, what is the pathology? Okay, now we'll look in the textbook to figure that out, okay? So again, cold is a governing qi of winter. Cold diseases are more commonly seen in the winter. Cold is a yin type evil, easily damages the yang qi. Let's just copy that and paste that here. Okay, easily damages the yang qi. So in the presence of cold, over a long period of time will also cause yang qi deficiency. Okay, so long time, oh, this shouldn't be underlined anymore. Long time with a cold type pathology equals yang qi deficiency. Why? Because cold injures the yang. Cold prevents proper movement, right? Cold causes constriction, right? If we have some injury, if I suddenly I'm nailing I have a hammer and nail, bump, 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 and then I hit my thumb, wow, right? And my thumb swells up and it turns red and black and it's so painful, right? And then I put my thumb in a bucket of ice. Why is that helpful? Simply because the cold type qi, the cold temperature, will cause the tissue of my body all to contract, right? So the short term, cold will help the trauma. Cold will cause the swelling to go down. Cold will prevent any further injury, right? But if I leave my thumb in that bucket for a long time and I don't take my thumb out, and my thumb just gets colder and colder and colder, eventually that cold qi will settle into my bones, will settle into my tendons, and my yang qi from my body, when it comes back out to try and flow into the thumb, and the qi and blood wants to flow in the thumb, it will actually be prevented because there will be stagnation from the cold qi penetrating, right? So cold qi, again, is it pathological? Is it not pathological? It depends on the context. We can use cold if we use it appropriately, or if we're exposed to cold inappropriately, can cause a problem in the body. In fact, the way that the kidney stores essence is similar to cold qi, right? That's one of the reasons why the kidney is the water organ, okay? It's not just arbitrary. It's not just like, oh, 5 elements, we're just going to spin a wheel and just randomly choose liver relate to wind and kidney relate to water. Why? We don't know, it's random. No, that's not the case at all. Okay, it's the quality of the qi. Cold type qi is related to water element, is related to kidney organ. They all have something in common, right? They all have something in common. It's not random. Just like liver, we talk about wind. Why is liver related with wind? Why is Jue Yin related with wind? Because the liver is responsible for what? The movement of qi and blood in the whole body. The movement, right? And the movement is wind. Wind is movement. So wind type, qi, wood element, liver tang, they all correlated. They all have something in common, right? So anyway, cold causes constriction. So this constriction injures yang qi. Why? Because again, yang is also movement, and wind is a yang. Wind is a yang evil, right? Nature of cold is congealing and stagnating. It governs contraction. Also governs pain. Tongzibu tongbu tongzi tong. So cold, one of the main symptoms of cold type diseases is pain. Okay. One of the main symptoms of cold type disease equals pain. Usually this pain is sudden and severe. Okay. Sudden and severe. So like you're out walking outside, you're going on a run. Maybe you're going on a run. You feel good. Feels so good, right? Your body starts heating up. You start sweating. All your pores are open. You think, oh man, this is great. All my qi and blood's really moving now. I feel good. But what if suddenly you're hit by a sudden blast of cold wind, hits you right in the neck, and you don't have a scarf on, you don't have a jacket on, and you're sweating? And right after that, you feel, oh, actually, now my neck feels stiff, right? The sudden result of a lot of cold qi will be pain. Or think about this. So that's exterior. Interior. If I have let's say not like a mug, but a giant, like a big giant cup, like a liter of water, very cold, filled with ice. And I go, I'm so thirsty. And I suddenly drink all the cold water. I drink like a whole liter of ice water, right? This ice water will cause my stomach to literally contract and will prevent the flow of qi and blood in my stomach, will cause pain over time, okay? So usually pain is sudden and severe related to cold type symptoms because cold causes sudden contraction, all right? This is where we are right now. Right now it's 10:17, 10:18. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Okay, I want you all, your brains to remain fresh. It's early in the morning. I'm talking fast and I'm lecturing about a lot of things. So get up, go walk around, drink some tea, take a breath, stretch your body, and let's meet each other back here at 10:28. Does that sound good, everyone? 10:28, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Sound good? Sounds good. Okay, excellent. Okay, thanks you guys. 10 minutes. Bye. All right, everyone, let's come back. Are you all there? Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. Okay. Well, let's continue. Let's continue. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate your participation so much. Even if it's just, responding in that little chat box. It helps me stay connected, right? It helps me know that you guys are out there because it's very different for me as a teacher to be talking to my computer for many hours every day. I hope it's entertaining and edifying. It's educational enough, and you guys are getting a lot out of the lecture. When we're back in person at some point, right? You guys will see. My style is very similar online as it is to in person, but there's a lot of things different where, it's a little bit harder for me to see exactly where you guys are at and judge based on your faces, whether you're understanding or not. So really, please don't hesitate to ask me questions or let me know if I need to slow down or go back over something. But at the same time, as you can probably already tell, you're not really going to understand very much the first time through. Because, right? So hopefully the way I'm breaking it down and the way I'm trying to relate it to a bunch of different things is helping you form these concepts. So anyway, we're talking about cold exterior evil. I emailed you all the notes. Okay, I emailed you all the notes from last class. So you don't have to check right now, but just check at some point, maybe on our next break, and let me know that you received those notes. I just emailed them to you using the emails that we have plugged into this classroom. Okay. Cold easily damages the yang qi, right? Does this make sense? It should make sense, right? Because yang qi is movement and yang qi is also like heat, right? So if there's cold, cold is going to cause contraction, constriction, which is going to diminish movement and also reduce heat, right? Qi. Qi is a yin-yang phenomenon, right? Qi is a yin-yang phenomenon. Mostly, right? So when we talk about qi, again, we can use things like time, temperature, feeling, all relate with qi. All these things will also have dual nature, meaning hot, cold, day, night, right? Kind of like burning sensation versus like a cold sensation, even like pain versus pleasure, empty versus full, feeling energized versus feeling tired, right? All these things are kind of like qi nature, right? And even in like the day, day and night, there's a yin within a yang within yin, right? So we can say that like the morning time is the small yang, right? The afternoon, or we can say like noon time is the big yang, right? Afternoon time is the small, actually afternoon, this is a debate. Is afternoon is a small yang or afternoon is a small yin or afternoon is the big yin, right? More classically speaking, afternoon will be the big yin. Why? Because big is yang and yin is yin. So it's a yin yang, yin within the yang, whereas nighttime is the small yin, which is the yin yin, right? Afternoon is the big yang, which is the yang yin. Noontime is the big yang, which is the yang yang. Morning time is a small yang, which is the yin in the yang. Okay, so this is all based on the Si Xiang, which we'll talk more about later. This is based on the Si Xiang, the four phenomenon, which just means what? Which just means yin yang within the yin yang is like 2 times 2 equals 4, right? It's a Si Xiang. 4. So the most basic model of yin yang is just yin and yang, right? But then one step further, and we get a yin within the yang and a yang within the yang, and we get a yang within the yin and a yin within the yin, right? Different people will actually have different ways of talking about this. So this can be confusing if you get hung up on the terminology, but if you understand the concept, it's very easy, okay? So qi also has this nature. Qi has a fundamental yin-yang nature, more than 5 elements, right? 5 elements talks more about shape. 5 elements will talk more about shape, material, substance, right? So then we talk about like the liver stores the blood, right? The spleen stores the yin, the heart stores the vessel, the lung stores the qi, right? The kidney stores the essence, right? These are all substances. They're all material, right? 5 elements relate more with shape, material, substance, and that's why we talk about the 5 elements mostly related to 5 elements equals the 5 zang organs, right? And organs are material as well. Here's the qi. When we talk about qi, in terms of physiology, qi will relate primarily with channels, with circulation. There's also obviously qi that comes from the organs, right? So like the yin qi, the wei qi, zhong qi, zong qi, zhen qi. There's these different types of qi can be related to the organs, but primarily qi will relate with channels, with circulation. Again, non-material. Okay. So qi is a yin-yang phenomenon, right? Cold and heat, they're different temperatures. When you put them together, because it's not material, you don't have like a cold particle over here and a hot particle over there. And then when they come together, they like can't mix because it's like two separate things. It's not the case. The cold qi in the air, the hot qi in the air, when they mix, they come together to make a neutral, right? Just like morning and evening, and in between there's neutral, and on the other side there's also neutral, right? There's a noon and a midnight from the sunrise to sunset. It's talking about yin and yang duality, right? So anyway, cold damages the yang because cold is yin, right? It's a yin evil, damages the yang qi. There are 3 characteristics of diseases caused by cold evil. 3 characteristics. I would memorize these. First, it can cause a cold sensation on the body. So cold evil will cause a cold sensation. The patient will say, my low back always feels cold. Why? Even when I'm in bed, I can't seem to get warm and I put on more blankets, but I feel very cold, right? Or my hands and feet are always cold. Even when I try and warm them up, I just can't get them warm, right? This could be an indication of a cold type pathogen. Entire body or area of it. Second, the excreted matter will be clear and cold. Excreted matter will be clear and cold, okay? So from the nose, if we have cold settling in the lung, from the nose, we'll have copious, clear nasal discharge. If it's a heat type pathogen, we won't have copious and clear. We'll have scanty, thick, and yellow. Opposite, right? Cold will cause copious, clear, excreted matter. Okay? Clear and cold, right? If we have cold settling on the interior, the bowel movements may also be watery and loose, right? Cold versus heat will cause constipation, okay? In the urination, if we have cold in the body, cold stuck in the lower jiao, cold stuck in the middle jiao, right? And even cold on the exterior can cause the same problem. Then the urination will be clear and copious. If we have heat stuck in the body, the urination will be scanty, dark, yellow, maybe even brown or red, okay? Opposite, duality, opposite, right? Cold versus heat, opposite. So cold causes excreted matter to be clear and cold. Third, there's often pain, congelation, stagnation of qi and blood, causing hypertonicity of channels and vessels. So everything's too tight. Not everyone knows this, right? This is actually something that Chinese medicine can help people understand why it's a bad idea to go running or exercising outside when the weather is cold and you're not wearing enough clothes, right? Western culture, Western science actually has an opposite view here. Western science says when it's cold outside, your body has to spend more energy to stay warm, which Chinese medicine says, yes, that's called injuring the yang qi. Western medicine says, no, that's good because then your body metabolism has to go up and your body has to burn more energy to stay warm, right? So you burn more calories when you exercise in the cold, which is technically true. But at the same time, in Chinese medicine, our idea is that our body heat is something that we want to conserve, something we want to store, not something we always want to drain. Because if we drain the body heat over and over and over, and we never store the body heat, eventually we'll have what? A cold problem. Well, someone exercising out in the cold rain every day what will happen to them? They'll become very stiff. They'll become very sore all the time. They'll have arthritis, right? You look at a lot of these, long distance athletes, right? Especially if what they do is they're running or biking or swimming in very cold conditions. Their bodies become very tight, very wiry, right? In Chinese medicine, this is actually not a good thing. Chinese medicine, we want the shape of our flesh to be round, right? The flesh should be pliable and soft. If the flesh is hard and too wiry, what does that mean? It means that qi and blood is not flowing to that area properly, right? If everything's so tight and so hard, so stringy, over time, this will cause malnourishment to those tissues. This will cause damage to those tissues. This will cause some kind of metabolic problem in those tissues because there'll be a lack of free flow. So cold, we actually need to be careful. Even if we exercise outside, which is a good idea, but when we go outside, we should stay relatively, we need to dress appropriately for the weather, right? It's not arbitrary. The weather is not arbitrary and it's not meaningless, right? It's something that Western science kind of doesn't really understand very well, is that consistent exposure to cold temperature changes tissues, right? It changes them for the long term, right? And you can reverse it with the application of heat. So that's why for me, it's like people who like to use cold therapy, because some people do. Some practitioners will use cold therapy, right? Or like a cold plunge. It's not that that's inappropriate. I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that it needs to be alternated with heat. That contraction needs to be alternated with expansion. If it's only contraction, we'll have a problem. If it's only expansion, we'll have a problem, because that's not yin-yang balance, right? So cold plunges aren't bad. They're okay, right? And you all know what I mean when I say cold plunge. Is like this therapy where people will be in a hot tub, alternating from hot tub to going in some like very low temperature water, back to the hot tub to the low temperature. What it does actually physiologically is it does really pump your lymphatic system, because all your smooth, your skeletal muscles expanding and contracting, your lymphatic vessels under the skin expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. This can actually remove pathogens from the surface layer of the body, right? This can be used to vent pathogens actually. But if you only stay in the cold, if you only dip in the cold over and over, eventually it will damage your yang qi, will cause problems in your joints, will cause problems in your small tissue, all kinds of things. If you only go in the hot over and over, it will also cause problems, okay? So it needs to be balanced. Disease patterns caused by cold can be divided into the settling of cold evil in the exterior and direct strike of cold evil. So here are the two types of cold ways cold attacks. Remember, we had the two types of winds. For the external wind, we had the internal wind. Then inside the external wind, we had exterior wind invasion excess and exterior wind invasion deficiency, right? Here in cold, we start to see how the branches of different kind of cold pathologies develop. We could have a cold evil in the exterior. So again, this will be like evil wind cold, or cold in the channels. Or we can have a direct strike of cold evil. Direct strike of cold evil means the cold qi, it didn't stop on the surface. It went directly into the body. Okay, so the example I gave, I think last week, was like the difference between somebody catching a cold and flu from being exposed to cold air, right? Because we all know that there are opportunistic pathogens in the nasal passageways, in the throat, right? That as soon as the homeostasis changes just a little bit, those opportunistic pathogens can infect these areas of the body, right? That will be exterior wind cold or exterior wind invasion, right? But what happens if conditions change and instead of cold or flu, somebody gets something like pneumonia? Okay, pneumonia is very different from cold or flu. Pneumonia is affecting the lung organs, right? The lung organ itself is internal, right? Not external. So if the cold evil can go directly in, what it means is the Wei qi is very weak. The Zheng qi is very weak. Okay. So cold type disorders or diseases, right? Number one, we have the exterior cold invasion. This is like a wind cold type of flu or common cold. Generally speaking, here we are talking about an upper respiratory invasion or infection, right? URI, right? In Western medical terminology, a URI, an upper respiratory infection, right? But we have another kind. It's called a direct strike of cold evil, right? Direct strike of cold evil means that the evil wind cold didn't settle in the exterior location as it should if the patient's Zheng qi is strong, right? Instead, it went directly into the organs, right? Directly into the interior part of the body. And the example here, is pneumonia, right? Instead of a cold or flu, okay? Does it make sense? The cold evil comes to the outside of the body. Either we can have the cold evil stopped here, or if there's nothing protecting us, it just goes directly in, okay? Direct strike has many kinds, right? Direct strike by cold can happen where? Could happen in the lung. Could happen in the stomach. Could happen in the spleen. Could happen in the intestines. Could happen in the liver, especially the liver channel, affecting the liver organ. Okay. Could also happen in the kidney. Probably can happen in other places I'm not thinking of at the moment, but these are the most common ones, right? And they'll all have their own different kind of presentation. Okay, the cold evil can directly strike any of these places. Cold evil settling in the exterior is a pattern caused by cold evil invading the exterior of the flesh, called the cold damage. Shanghan, right? Shanghan Lun just means the cold damage discussion, right? So the whole book only talks about how cold and wind start all problems, right? It's a specialty. It's like a very small specialty inside Chinese medicine. Direct strike of cold evil is a disease pattern of cold evil directly striking viscera and bowels, zang and fu, right? You all know the terminology. Viscera and bowels equals zang and fu, right? Zang organs store essence. They are full, but can never be filled, right? Meaning that they like to remain full of essence and that essence cannot be too much. For example, we cannot have too much essence in the kidneys, right? We cannot have too much essence in the kidneys, but we can have not enough. So that's why we say the zang organs store essence and they are full but can never be filled. Okay? They should remain full, but they can never be filled. Okay? The fu organs are the opposite. Fu organs convey water, food, and waste. Okay? Different function, right? The zang organ's main function is store essence, transform the essence to qi. Okay, store essence and transform essence to qi. This is the main job of zang organs, right? That's their whole function. The fu organ's function is very different. Fu organ's function is to convey water, food, and waste, right? The fu organs are the tubes. The fu organs are the hollow places where water and food is moving through and being mashed along, right? It's all of our like the esophagus, leading to the stomach, leading to the small intestine, the large intestine, the urinary bladder, the gallbladder, right? Also, all the ducts of lymph and body fluids and all the water, the sanjiao, right? All these places which are ruled by conveyance, something moving. It's different in our other organs. In the liver, right? The liver should be solid. There shouldn't be any pockets or holes in the liver, right? The spleen, it should be solid. The kidneys, they should be solid, right? We're basically talking about organs that are either, like interfacing with the exterior of the body, which the alimentary canal, the digestive tract includes the exterior part, or organs that interface with the bloodstream itself, right? So zang and fu, we can also think of a couple other words. There's the word exocrine versus endocrine in Western medicine, right? So in Western medicine, the exocrine means that the organ or the gland secretes to the outside of the body, right? So for example, like gallbladder. Gallbladder has an exocrine function. It squirts out the bile, and the bile goes into the small intestine, right? Just as the small intestine has a juncture with the stomach, the bile enters there, right? This is not going into our bloodstream, okay? Endocrine means that the organ or the gland, and this shouldn't say secrete, this should say excretes, sorry. Secretes to the inside of the body, right? In the vessel, we can say, versus outside the vessel, we can say. So this also roughly is equivalent with zang and fu, right? The zang should not connect with the outside. The zang should be the most inside and solid. The fu connects with the outside, and the fu is just things moving through tubes. Conveys food and waste. So because it conveys food and waste, what we say about the fu organs is that they are filled, but can never be full, okay? So the fu organs should almost always have some water food in them. The problem with the fu organs is when they become filled, right? When they become, they should be filled with water food, but when they become full of water food, we have a problem, right? Think about it. Think about if somebody has like impacted bowels, or somebody hasn't had a bowel movement in maybe like 3 or 4 days. Maybe they haven't had a bowel movement in like a week. This is a very dangerous situation, right? This could be a deadly situation because the fu organs have to constantly move. If somebody's fu organs are not moving, that could be death, right? Just like the zang organ. If the zang organ is not storing, if the kidney is leaking essence instead of storing essence, that could result in the person has some serious problem, right? So with the fu organs, we say filled but can never be full, which is opposite of the zang, which we say full but can never be filled. Okay? Meaning that they always have something in them, but they will have pathology when they reach the point that they are full. We don't want them full, we want them filled, which is different, right? Full meaning like it's full to the brim. Like if I take this cup and I pour water in the cup to the point that the water's overflowing, that's bad for the fu organs, right? The fu organs, we want it filled, but we only want it halfway full. Only halfway. Why only halfway with the fu organ? Because then it can still move. The zang organs are the opposite. We want it full all the time. If it has anything empty, that's when the problem happens with the zang organs. Does this make sense, you guys? Zang and fu is yin and yang, different. Okay, they're opposite. Just reviewing Foundations 1, right? So cold damage, direct strike versus exterior invasion. Symptoms of exterior cold. Okay, here we go. I think you already know these. Aversion to cold, no sweating, pain in the head and body, pain in the joints, a thin white tongue fur. Okay, white tongue fur rules cold. Yellow tongue fur rules heat. Now you'll learn this in Diagnosis 1, okay? You'll learn this in Diagnosis 1 when we talk about tongue, right? We're not there yet. We're still talking about Bagang in Diagnosis 1. We're talking about the basic system of pattern differentiation, right? How do you differentiate patterns in Chinese medicine? The number one system you learn is called Bagang. It applies to everything. Pulse that is floating and tight. Floating pulse, which you'll learn later, means exterior invasion, means yang rising, could be yin deficiency, could be many things. But number one thing, it means the yang is on the upper and outer. Okay, tight pulse is a cold tight pulse. Okay, tight pulse means constriction, contraction. In the vessel, you can feel the surface of the vessel kind of hard, like tight, right? Means that the cold evil has caused constriction. Okay, symptoms of cold evil, direct strike. So we're giving you two different types of symptoms, right? Just for an example. You're not memorizing all the patterns yet, right? You couldn't memorize them all yet. It would be too much, and you don't have the vocabulary. So we just give you examples. Direct strike. See how it's different? Look, the exterior cold had aversion to cold, fever with no sweating. So here's your chills and fever simultaneous, right? There's that. But direct strike doesn't have that, okay? Direct strike has cold pain in the abdomen, intestinal rumbling, vomiting and diarrhea, a pale tongue with white fur. Notice here they didn't talk about the tongue body. We'll tell you why later. It's because the tongue body shows an interior condition, okay? So when the tongue body doesn't change, it means the condition is not located on the interior. If only the coating changes, is more exterior, okay? Vomiting and diarrhea. Pale tongue with white fur and a pulse that is deep, tight, or deep and slow, okay? So deep and tight is more excess, deep and slow is more cold, deficiency, okay? I'll write this down in the notes just so you have it. Okay. Tight pulse equals excess cold. Okay. Slow pulse equals deficiency cold. Even if you're not totally sure what that means, we'll learn about that. Okay. In diagnosis, when we talk about Bagang, we'll talk about we already talked about excess and deficiency, right? So, any questions?
What about sweat with direct strike?
Yeah, so because we're not talking about an exterior invasion, the symptoms are not located on the surface of the body, right? Exterior invasion relate more to the skin, the tsoli, the pores. So here could be, if there were sweating in this case, it would be strange. And what it would indicate would be some kind of like yin-wei disharmony, maybe some wei-qi deficiency. But we're not mentioning sweat here because the location is internal versus external, right?
Okay.
When the location, does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great question. So analysis of cold evil, right? When the cold evil is on the exterior, the wei qi is damaged and the sweat pores are tightly closed. Hence, there is aversion to cold, lack of sweating, and depression of the defense, the wei, yang, causes fever. What do they mean depression here? Depression of the defense yang causes fever. So imagine this, right? Your wei qi is circulating on the outside, but this cold evil suppresses that yang circulation, which causes like friction, right? It will cause something like friction. The result of that friction is a fever, right? So when it's on the exterior, if it's excess, right, then that's what we get. We get a fever, we get aversion to cold, no sweating. Nature of cold is congealing and stagnating. It governs contraction, right? When there is a contraction of cold evil, the channels, networks, and blood vessels, they all contract and congeal and stagnate. So they're not free. Hence, there's pain. Because why? Tong zi bu tong, bu tong zi tong. Where there's free flow, there's no pain. Where there's pain, there's no free flow, right? Tongue fur is thin and white. Pulse is floating, governs the exterior, right? A floating pulse governs the exterior conditions. Tight governs cold conditions. Hence, the above signs are ascribed to an exterior cold pattern, okay? Shanghan Lun will call this Taiyang Shanghan, okay? Taiyang, greater yang cold damage means what? Taiyang Shanghan equals greater yang, Taiyang Shanghan. This is what we were talking about before. It's like Taiyang stage diseases, right? Often include cold type damage. And the cold evil will affect the Taiyang specifically. But doesn't mean that cold, right? Actually, cold is associated with Taiyang in this case, because Taiyang is urinary bladder, is water element, is cold type qi, right? So in this case, it's the same thing that it's associated with is what causes the problem. Direct strike of cold evil on the zang and fu, or excessive intake of cold and raw food, damages the yang qi of the spleen and stomach. So now we're talking about the direct strike. We're explaining the direct strike. We've changed from the exterior invasion to the internal diagnosis. Direct strike of cold evil on the viscera and bowels, or excessive intake of cold and raw food, damages yang qi of spleen, stomach. Hence, there's cold pain in the abdomen. When the spleen does not fortify and transport, the stomach does not downbear properly. This causes intestinal rumbling, clear cold vomit, and diarrhea. Pale tongue, white tongue fur, and deep and slow or tight all govern interior cold. Again, is it more deficiency? We'll have a slow pulse. Is it more excess? We'll have a tight pulse. Okay. Treatment method. We'll have two different treatment methods because we talked about two different types of disease, right? When cold settles in the exterior, resolve the exterior by diffusing with acrid warm. A representative formula is a Ma Huang Tang, right? Ma Huang Tang is the formula that's related to that first herb you learned in acrid warm herbs that release exterior, right? Ma Huang is a very potent acrid herb to induce sweating. Ma Huang also can increase the heart rate. Ma Huang can increase the basal body temperature. Ma Huang also increases urination. Ma Huang is a very, very potent herb, and it can be used in a wide variety of circumstances, okay? Here we're talking about it relieving wind and cold on the exterior, but it also has an interior function on the lung, zang, right? So I'll tell you a little story about me using Ma Huang in the clinic, right? Had a patient when I was a student at 5 Branches, and I was an intern under Kevin. And this patient suffered from chronic asthma. She had really, really serious, serious kind of intolerance to certain environmental toxins. She grew up and was raised on a farm. And so when she was raised, she would often be working in the fields, harvesting things like pecans or almonds or oranges, citrus fruits in San Jose many, many years ago in like the 50s and 60s. And she would be in the fields while they would be spraying the pesticides and herbicides overhead. So she was exposed to a lot of environmental toxicity, which settled in her lung, right? Caused her to have asthma as a young adult. Such severe asthma that she needed to use an inhaler constantly. Like every day she had to take like 10 or 12 puffs of the inhaler. And she was actually having some hormone imbalances because the albuterol is actually a steroid hormone, right? So albuterol, the constant use of the albuterol had dysregulated her lungs in a way that had actually made her asthma worse. As she aged, right? When I saw her, she was in her 70s. She was in her middle 70s, and this was about 8 years ago. As she aged, her asthma got worse and worse and worse, right? She started to have to take cortisone, right? She had to take cortisone drugs, and she had to take steroids to keep her lung passages open to prevent the asthma from becoming so bad that she needed to go to the hospital, right? So she eventually became addicted to these steroid hormone drugs, these cortisone-based drugs. She became so addicted that she ended up generating endocrine disorder, right? She ended up getting like Cushing's disease, right? Her whole body was swollen. She couldn't breathe. Her face was swollen. She had very low energy. At the same time, she couldn't sleep. Her mood was dysregulated. She was very angry and upset all the time. She couldn't calm herself down. She would be urinating all the time, urinating, very thirsty all the time. Her tongue was bright red and totally peeled. She could barely breathe. She could barely talk. She had no lung qi. She wanted to get off the steroid hormone drugs, and she wanted to no longer be dependent on them to breathe because she knew that they were making her condition worse and worse and worse. Actually, at the point that I saw her, she was being hospitalized maybe like twice a week because she couldn't breathe. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and she couldn't breathe. She would take her albuterol and it wouldn't help. She would take her drugs and it wouldn't help. She'd have to go to the hospital and they would have to give her high doses of steroid drugs just to get her lungs to open back up again. Okay. It was a pretty bad situation. She was very, very uncomfortable. She was basically concerned for her life. She was concerned that her asthma had turned into COPD that was going to threaten her life, and she wanted off the drugs. Of course, I didn't tell her to get off the drugs. It was what she wanted, because we can't tell our patients. We can give them no recommendation or suggestion regarding their Western pharmaceuticals. It's outside of our scope of practice, right? But she came to me, and that's what she wanted. She wanted this help. And I felt really bad for her, right? I had a lot of sympathy for her because she was a really sweet older woman. She was a grandma. She had a family. She couldn't enjoy her family because of this breathing problem that she had. So I put her on a formula called, and with Kevin's help, right? I was an intern at this time. Kevin helped me figure this out. Name of the formula is the Shao Qing Long Tang. The main herb is Ma Huang, okay? This formula can be used for exterior cold invasions with simultaneous yang qi deficiency, right? Which is what the patient had. It can also be used for any kind of lung obstruction where cold or yin type evil like water accumulates in the lung and obstructs the free flow of body fluids, qi, blood, etc. So ma huang is a very strong herb to dilate the lungs. Okay, very, very strong herb to dilate the lungs, also dilate the pores. Okay, so you can use it for somebody who has cold stuck on the exterior. You can also use it for somebody who has cold stuck on the interior, right? Because this woman's lungs were constantly contracted, it was similar to cold type qi. So I put her on this Shaoqing Longtang, and it was kind of miraculous. She would only have to take, 1 dose of herbs every day, and it would prevent the onset of her asthma altogether, right? She stopped needing to use the albuterol inhaler as much. She stopped needing to depend on the steroid hormones to keep her lungs dilated. Of course, because she was already addicted to the steroid hormones, and she'd already started down the pathway of Cushing's disease. It was kind of advanced. Her case was kind of, the pathology was pretty advanced. So the Shaoqing Longtang could not reverse that. But the Shaoqing Longtang was very helpful in her case because it allowed her to breathe comfortably, right? It allowed her to not have to worry that she might have to go to the hospital because the drugs weren't working. In fact, a couple of times she did get an asthma attack. She had the Shaoqing Longtang already prepared in her doses every day. That's what I told her to do, is to cook the herbs, then separate it into doses. Then you could take the doses whenever you needed. You wouldn't have to wait for the herbs to cook. So she would take her dose, and within minutes, the asthma would go away, right? Unfortunate thing in this case was that this woman's, the progression of her illness was already so severe that she did pass away several years later. But in this case, she was able to pass away and spend those last years in relative comfort and not having to go to the hospital twice a week, not having to rely on her drugs. Of course, she still used the drugs. And see, this is the real power of Chinese medicine in the modern Western healthcare system, is we have so many patients whose pathology is being made worse by their medications, but at the same time, they can't get off the medications, right? And we don't want them off the medications, because if we just took them off the medications, it might make their condition suddenly much worse, right? So there's a lot of people who are very, very sick in the United States. Chinese medicine can help change their condition. And integrative medicine, integrating Western with the Chinese, can have very, very big effects on this healthcare system, can change a lot of people's dependence on very toxic pharmaceuticals that have strong side effects, which are helpful for their condition, but also have some really negative sides. Of course, the best thing would be if nobody was sick at all, right? Which is the standard in Chinese medicine, is prevention is the golden standard. But at the same time, we also have to realize we're dealing with a lot of patients who are very, very ill, right? And who have already very developed pathologies. In those cases, what can we do, right? Do we give up because we can't totally reverse their illness? No, we don't give up on them, right? Because we're human beings. We have to have compassion, right? We have to understand that our job is to help improve these people's quality of life no matter what, right? If they're very ill, we can definitely improve their quality of life. Also, if they're not very ill, we can improve their quality of life by helping them never become ill, right? But there's no point at which we give up. Even if the patient is very, very sick, right? Even if they're going to die anyway, but we still don't give up. We want to make sure that their quality of life improves. And we'll do whatever we can to improve the quality of life. And it is never acceptable for us to make it worse, right? It's never acceptable for us to make their disease worse. So do no harm, right? That's the Western medicine standard, is do no harm, is also the Chinese medicine standard, is do no harm, right? If we can only improve a little, at least we improved a little. If we can improve a lot, wonderful. Let's improve a lot, as much as we can. But just because we can't improve a lot doesn't mean we won't improve a little, okay? So ma huang's a very, very important herb. You can do things with ma huang no other herb will do, right? Let's look at our notes really quick. So that's it for cold. So now you understand cold. What I want you to focus on, so to review, let's just do a quick review before we take our next 10-minute break, okay? What I want you to look at here is all of these things. Cold is a yin evil, damages a yang qi. Nature is congealing, okay? Stagnating, contracting, governs pain. First things that you might notice with a cold case is there will be a cold sensation, okay? And also, excreted matter will be clear and cold. And also, there's often pain. This, basically, this whole paragraph, I need you to memorize, okay, and understand. Also need you to understand, cold can settle in the exterior or cold can move to the interior, okay? So, number one, cold damages yang qi. Number two, cold causes stasis, contraction, stagnation. Number three, cold causes pain. Okay, it's a yin evil. Okay, also, two types of cold diseases. Exterior invasion, direct strike. Okay. Exterior invasion, usually cold gangs up with wind, okay, settles in the exterior, causes exterior symptoms, right? Direct strike means the zheng qi is not strong, or the patient took too much cold water food, or took something very cold directly into the body, leads to cold settling in the zang fu organs. Okay, different location, right? Again, direct strike versus exterior invasion, we're talking about different locations. Okay, this is the key, right? We need to understand that the same pathogen in different locations will show different symptoms. However, they will be related by the quality and characteristics of the evil qi involved. Okay, that's why I always emphasize, why I told you what you need to memorize is this first, really you have to memorize this, right? Because if you understand this about cold evil, then you will see cold evil in every different situation. You'll understand, oh, this is exterior, this is interior. Oh, this is interior in the stomach. Oh, this is interior in the kidney. This is exterior in the joints. This is exterior in the Zhou Li, in the exterior layer, right? In the Wei Qi and the Yin Wei disharmony, right? They can all have cold as the pathogen, but it will show differently in different locations, okay? So that's it for cold. Next, we're going to move on to talk about what? Summer heat type disease, which is very different. Okay, summer heat's a very different from wind, very different. They each are their own animals, so to speak. Let's take another 10-minute break. Let's meet back up at, right now it's 11:19. So let's meet back up at 11:29, everyone. We're going to continue here. Hopefully get through some more 6 evils so that we can move on through the curriculum. Any questions before we go? Anybody have any questions? Okay, no questions. Then, oh, okay, excellent. No questions. Then let's come back at 11:29, everyone. Go walk around, stretch your neck. Everyone stretch your necks. All this computer stuff is going to cause stagnation in the neck, okay? So roll your shoulders, move your chest, okay? Make sure you move your neck side to side. Don't let your neck muscles get too tight, okay? If your neck muscles are tight, this will actually affect your head and your face, okay? Also your shoulders. Go walk around, okay? I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Bye. Okay, let's begin again. We're back on. Okay, so, before we move on to summer heat, I was just looking at our notes. I want to go back and just look at the textbook. I want to review with you guys to show you what it is that Deng says exactly what we find in our notes. Okay, this is the extent to which he talks about the cold evil, right? Is here, 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 and here. And this is exactly what I have in our notes copied and pasted, basically. Right, Ma Huang Tang we just talked about. And then the internal formula is a Li Zhong Tang. Okay, the internal formula to disperse cold evil directly striking in like the stomach or the intestines or the spleen. Li Zhong Tang is the formula. Just want to say a little bit about Li Zhong Tang also. So like, right, Ma Huang Tang equals formula good for exterior cold, also good for interior cold in the lungs especially. Okay. Li Zhong Tang, the main herb in Li Zhong Tang, it's not in the name, right? Li Zhong Tang just means like rectify the center decoction. The main herb here is actually Anjiang, which equals dried ginger. Okay, so ginger root is very good at dispelling cold, right? The fresh ginger can dispel cold in the lung as well as the stomach. Fresh ginger also can induce sweating. Fresh ginger can also reduce nausea, okay? However, dried ginger is different, okay? Dried ginger can be used to increase the basal body temperature. You can also use fresh ginger to do it, but the dried ginger will last longer. So somebody who has cold evil settling on the interior can use dried ginger to expel that cold and restore the internal condition to one where there will be free flow of qi, blood, and yang, okay? So like the pain, we read about the pain being caused in the stomach here, right? Internal. Spleen does not fortify and transport. When we have a direct strike of cold evil in the viscera and bowels, excessive intake of cold or raw food damages the yang qi. The result will be what? Cold pain of the abdomen, right? Cold pain of the abdomen. So the Li Zhong Tang, the dried ginger, can relieve this cold pain by dispelling the cold, by opening up the stagnation in that location. Okay. Okay, so that's what he talks about that here. Obviously, we read that. Deng talks about cold, and next he talks about summer heat. But if we move on to Giovanni, just look at, he talks about, this is all he talks about the 6 evils. He puts all the information of the 6 evils in about 3/4 of a page, right? So it's really not much information. It's actually a much, much too superficial of a treatment for you guys to be able to really understand the nature of 6 evils. So our class, like the first, several weeks, we talk about 6 evils. We'll probably be able to make it through summer heat today, and then maybe next week we'll finish all the 6 evils. But Giovanni only talks about them like this, right? He says, this is all you need to know about cold. Invading the muscles and sinews, stiffness, contraction of muscles, pain, and chilliness. Invading the joints, severe pain in the joint. Invading the stomach, sudden epigastric pain, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, dysmenorrhea, right? It's really not enough. He's not talking about the qualities, the characteristics, their yin-yang designation, the relationship to the calendar, the way that they show up in all the different parts of the body. That's what we need to talk about here. So you can see why I'm not using Giovanni as the main text, because his treatment of this topic, which is very important, is actually very superficial. So you can read this if you want, but this is all you're going to find. This is all he talks about for wind. This is all he talks about for cold. Okay. And then summer heat, he talks even less, but you'll see when we talk about summer heat, we're going to talk a lot about it. Okay. So just wanted to show you that, where you can find it in the book. Number 3 of the 6, right? We're going to finish this one today. Summer heat is the chi of, this says fire heat. So you're probably going, wait, what? Fire heat, the chi of fire heat. Yeah, it's the chi of fire element, right? Fire element, there's actually, in the 6, there's 2 related to fire, okay? If we go, let me explain what I mean by that. That's kind of a strange thing to say. In the 6, there's 2 fires, right? Let me explain what I mean. So I think we talked about, maybe several weeks ago, I explained that the logic of Chinese medicine is based on symbology of numbers, right? Numbers. That's why Chinese is like the most mathematical, most algebraic, most logical language, is because the concepts, they directly interface with each other and they stack, and the way you arrange them and the way you pair them and their ordering is actually very important to understand the meaning. And Chinese is the same as Chinese medicine. The context tells you the usage, right? So in Chinese language, just like in Chinese medicine, context is actually more important than content. This is something to contemplate, because in English, it's definitely the opposite. Content is more important than context. We always say, what are you talking about? What did you say? We don't say, how are you speaking? How did you intend that, right? We are more interested in what versus how. The Chinese are more interested in how, and less interested in what, okay? So this is important to consider. So logic of Chinese medicine based on symbology of numbers, okay? We know there are 5 elements. However, there are 6 evil chi and 6 channels. Why? Why not 5? 5 elements should be 5 evil chi, 5 channels, right? Why? I will explain briefly, but in the Neijing class, this will take us several weeks to explain. I'm going to give you the very brief overview. 5 elements are like templates that the natural world manifests through, right? So we can say there's 5 colors, there's 5 tastes, there's, also in Chinese, there's 5 tones. There's 5, 绝知工商yu, right? Is the 5 tones related to the 5 elements. So their musical system is based on 5, not on 7. Ours is based on 7. Theirs is based on 5. The 5 elements are just this template through which things manifest, right? That we can associate and ascribe things to. However, as things manifest, they change in how they come into form and how they come into being. So we also know that 5 elements relates more to shape, to essence, to material. We've already said that. The 6 chi is chi, right? Equals immaterial. Also, 6 channels are related to chi, which is immaterial. So when 5 material transforms to 6 immaterial, the 5 elements have to change to accommodate this structure, okay? Inside of 6, there is 5, okay? 6 is one model. 5 is another model. Definitely 6 comes from 5, okay? But how? So we know 5 elements equals, and you're going to hear me give a lecture similar to this over and over and over again. And every time I give this part of the lecture, you're going to understand it a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. Initially, you might not understand what I'm saying at all, but I just want you to think about it and contemplate it. Okay, go home and think about this. So 5 elements we have wood, fire, earth, metal, water, right? In the 6 chi, we have right, wind, heat, summer heat, damp, dry, and cold. Okay, if we try and relate these 2 models, we can find wind equals wood chi. Okay, heat equals fire chi. Summer heat equals fire chi. What? 2 fires? Yes, 2 fires. Let me explain. Damp equals earth chi. Dry equals metal chi. Cold equals water chi. Okay, so the other elements, they don't get 2 types of chi, right? But also, if you think about the body, human body, we also have 6 channels that follow this same scheme, right? You have the 6 channels. We have Jue Yin is related to wood. You have Xiao Yin is related to fire. We have the Xiao Yang is related to, also relate to fire, right? Heart, fire. Also, Sanjiao, fire, right? Both fire elements, right? Heart and small intestine. The Sanjiao and pericardium, right? Earth is Tai Yin, right? Metal will be Yang Ming. Water will be, finally, Taiyang, okay? That's how the 6 channels match with the 5 elements, okay? But what you notice and what I want you to focus on is this part here. The rest, this again, I don't expect you to understand this right off the bat. I just want you to see this, contemplate it, think about it, okay? This is, again, like the deep logic of Chinese medicine. Why 2 fires? Because in the human body and when heaven and earth interact, fire becomes 2 principles, okay? Fire has 2 main functions, okay? And these functions are very different, okay? The first function of fire equals light. We use fire as technology for this purpose. We use fire to produce light, correct? We use candles. Originally, before there was electricity, which is electricity probably we can say is a form of fire type chi. Before there was electricity, because electricity tends to be very hot, it burns things, right? Electricity clings to things like fire does. Fire clings to things. Before we had electricity, we had to use candles, right? We would light candles, light torches. Fire and sunlight were our only forms of light. There was no other forms of light in nature, right? In the human body, what do you guys think is this function of fire, this light? Can you think? What is like the light? The shun, the spirit, right? The spirit in the human body. The spirit, right? Yeah, that's an action is a good idea. Action as a word is more related to wood element, like activity, right? Getting things done. In the human body, the light is the shun, or we can say the shun, the spirit. Spirit is light in the human body, right? Because of the shun, we can do things like know or think, right? Because of the shun, we have cognitive processes. We can feel things. We can imagine things, right? And this is how the shun is related to hun, right? So the shun is the function of light that's like a candle, that's shining light. And this light, this function of light, is our consciousness, right? It's really our ability. Our shun is like this field that projects in the whole body, right? It's the way I can feel my hands is because my shun is in my hands. It's how do I know that this wall behind me is like this yellow color, saffron color? I can see it with my eyes, right? My shun exists as this field around me, which is like the light being cast off from a candle, right? In order for the candle to have light, the candle needs wax, the candle needs a wick, the candle needs to be lit. All these things together will form the light to shine, right? When we want this light to shine, where do we place it? Do we place the light high or do we place the light low? The location. Will the location be up or the location be down if we want to use fire for light? Location will be up, right? If we hold a torch high in the air, the light will cast, right? If we put the candle up, the light rays will cast down, we'll be able to see. This is the reason why in the human body, the heart is in the upper jiao. And the heart is the location for the shun to reside in the upper jiao, right? The shun does not reside in the lower jiao. The shun is not residing in my kidneys, in my lower back area, in my lower jiao area, right? Because that wouldn't be the right place for the spirit. It wouldn't be the right place for this function of what we call imperial fire. So the two fires have different names, okay? This is all straight from the Neijing. This is all just like directly straight from the Huangdi Neijing, you know, the 10,000-year-old book that's the seminal book of Chinese medicine theory and knowledge, right? This is all just direct. I'm giving you guys like a direct download from Kevin, right? Imperial fire is what we call this light that is the shun, that is related to the heart, zang, okay? And then equals consciousness. This is basically shun, basically equals our consciousness, okay? And our consciousness is something very difficult to define, right? Just like light, right? It takes all these things combined together in order for this to happen, right? We can't just have the wax, we can't just have the lighter, and we can't just have the wick, and they're also, it all has to be coming together. And when it's all coming together, there's this extra effect of light is created, okay? But there's another fire in the body, right? Another fire in the body. The second function of fire equals heat, okay, heat. Now, we can also use fire as technology to produce heat, right? And the human body also needs heat. So in the human body, what is this heat, right? What is it that produces the metabolic fire, the heat, the ability to transform nutrition, to transform essence into qi, to steam the water so that we get a bunch of qi from all this essence, right? What is that? Well, in the body, we call this ministerial fire is the heat, which is basically equivalent to the yuan qi that travels in our sanjiao, right? The heat and metabolic fire that travels throughout the body is housed in the what? The kidney, right? Just like here, the shun is housed in the heart. The ministerial fire is actually housed in the kidney, right? but it exits and moves through the gallbladder and Sanjiao. Okay, so the gallbladder is said to be where the ministerial fire exits from. Okay, remember gallbladder is Shaoyang. And remember how we set up here that the Shaoyang is related to summer heat, which is also the other fire. And you remember up here how we said that the heat and fire qis relate to Shaoyin. So here we have like the heart, right? And then here we have like the Sanjiao and the gallbladder, right? The kidney participates in both of these. The kidney is paired with the heart in the Shaoyin, but also the kidney is the place where the fire in the metabolic fire is stored in the body. This is the relationship between our physicality and our consciousness, right? These two fires are the link between the way that my mind, my emotions actually changes my physiology. If I'm very upset or angry, my body will start to become hot. My qi will start to rise. Eventually, a lot of anger will cause heat conditions. Eventually, a lot of anger, frustration will cause yin deficiency, right? Because anger will cause the imperial fire talking to the ministerial fire will make all the fire start flaring upward, right? The emotions, the consciousness really is not separate from the body. They're actually not separate at all. They're completely connected. So connected, it's even partially a mistake to say they're not the same thing, right? This is how they're connected, is between this two fire theory, okay? When I'm very depressed, when I feel no motivation, don't want to do anything, right? All my yang qi starts descending. Eventually, my body will take a very yin quality, right? The long-term effect of that will be a cold condition, right? You don't want to do anything. You don't want to move. You don't feel you have what it takes to go out in the world and make things happen. So everything just starts descending, right? Everything becomes kind of too yin, right? It's like a cold condition. It's like stagnation, okay? So ministerial fire, the gallbladder is where the ministerial fire exits from, right? The Shaoyang. But the Sanjiao is what it travels through, okay? So the Mingmen, have you all heard about the Mingmen? You know what the Mingmen is. The Mingmen is the place between the two kidneys where this fire is housed. It is related to metabolism, to basal body temperature, ability to transform and transport all materials in the body, right? The spleen yang comes from the kidney yang, and this yang is simply ministerial fire, okay? So when the spleen yang is deficient, we can actually use kidney yang tonics to boost the spleen yang. Why? Because kidney and spleen yang are the same yang. You can think of like your stove. When you turn on the fire, there's a pilot light which remains lit. If that pilot light didn't remain lit, when you turn on the gas, you wouldn't be able to get any fire, right? The pilot light is the kidney. The pilot light is where the fire stores. Then you turn on the gas and the fire shows up somewhere else. This is the ministerial fire, creating the heat, right? So if the pilot light goes out, that's the kidney yang is deficient, then the spleen yang will also be deficient. We can never have a situation where the kidney yang was deficient, but the spleen yang wasn't, because the kidney yang is the deep part of the spleen yang, okay? So ganjiang, we just talked about Li Zhongwan. That's what Li Zhongwan does. That's what ganjiang does. Ganjiang restores the yang of the spleen. But guess what? Ganjiang can also be used to support the yang of the kidney. So spleen yang and kidney yang, here's one saying, something you should remember, is spleen yang and kidney yang have the same source. In fact, they are the same thing. That's why, as you will all see very soon, the symptoms of the two conditions, right, spleen yang deficiency and kidney yang deficiency, are very similar and obviously related, right? They're very similar and obviously related. Also, you can treat them both by tonifying the yang of the kidney, right? It's different locations, but it's the same type of qi manifesting in different places, spleen and kidney, okay? But also all the yang in the body, okay? All the yang in the body, right? Except the shun, right, is related to ministerial fire, okay? Why ministerial versus imperial, right? Ministerial meaning what? Imperial meaning what? Okay, so in Chinese government, right, the emperor is the ultimate decision maker. But also the emperor needs to remain very calm, very clear-headed. Because if the emperor is not calm and clear-headed, then all the decisions he makes will be affected by his own emotional turmoil, right? This is like the shun. The shun needs to remain clear, right? So the shun is not what causes heat in the body, right? The shun tells, the imperial fire, my heart, my consciousness, tells my body what to do with the yang qi, right? The emperor tells the ministers. The emperor says, today's this kind of day. Ministers, do this. And then the ministers go do it. And the ministers talk to all the people that need talking to. They do all the activities. They're the ones who roll up their sleeves and do the dirty work, right? They're the ones who are actually out there working. The emperor is not out there working because if the emperor's too much activity, his mind won't be calm enough. His mind won't be clear enough to be able to make the perfect decisions, right? So the relationship between imperial fire and ministerial fire is the same as a relationship between emperors and their ministers, is the same as a relationship between the heart and the kidney. Okay? So when we get upset, our consciousness and emotions are affected. The way that that affects our body, our physiology, is through the relationship of these two fires. And they're different, okay? This is how 5 becomes 6. A 5 becomes 6 is through two fires, okay? So that's a little explanation, right? So summer heat, why are we talking about this? Because the next thing we have to talk about is summer heat, okay? Summer heat is our next unit. And summer heat is related to heat, but it's different, right? Summer heat is not heat. They're distinct things. Just like imperial fire and ministerial fire are different things, okay? Don't forget the fire type qi. This is the imperial fire, okay? This is the ministerial fire. Okay, I'm going to highlight this. Right? This is very important to understand. This is very important to understand. Okay, the nature of these two fires. How does 5 become 6? How does the 5 zang relate with the 6 channels? Is in this same way, is this same kind of relationship. The 5 zang are the essence. The 5 zang are the material, right? The 6 channels are the movement. When the essence, the material, transforms to qi to become movement, it has to go from a 5 model to a 6 model. And they're different models. They're not the same, even though they're related, okay? We haven't talked about how 4 relates to 5, but 4 relates to 5, just like 3 relates to 4, 2 relates to 3, 1 relates to 2, 0 to 1. That's what I teach in Foundations 1 is cosmology. How do we understand the concepts of the Wuji, Taiji, Yin Yang, Sansai, Sixiang, Wuxing, Liuqi, Qixing, Bagua, Jiugong. They're all, and my Chinese is terrible, right? I have to learn to speak Chinese. I'm halfway to learning to read it, but I have to learn to speak it. My tones are horrible. So anybody who's listening now who speaks Chinese, I apologize profusely. I know I need to work on my Chinese is not good enough. I'm a young man, so I still have time, but I'm working on it. That's a big goal for me this year and very soon is I have to learn to read and write Chinese because we need more people who have the dual specialty of English language and scholastic abilities English, but also scholastic abilities Chinese. So anyway. Summer heat, right? Summer heat is the Shaoyang ministerial fire. So let's read a little bit about summer heat now. Okay, back to the details. Any questions before I dramatically change gears? I know you probably aren't able to totally follow me, but I just like to give you the context of what we're talking about, or else I think it's too much to ask you just follow the details, but you don't know what we're talking about. So no questions. We can move on just directly learning about summer heat. Okay.
That's I have a question, but I've been asking so many questions.
It's okay.
So like for instance with Dragon, it corresponds with wood and
Yes.
wind, and the liver corresponds with that as well as the pericardium, which is fire. And is
Yes.
that because there is fire within the wood? Like it is a part of it?
So there are different ways that the organs are related to each other, right? So we have internal, external pairs, but we also have the same element pairs. And these are different kinds of pairings, okay? So let me break that down for you. That will answer this question. I mean, you didn't really ask. I hear the question in the way you framed it, right? I understand what the problem is, right? Biao-Li pairs means internal, external pairs, okay? However, there are also same element pairs, okay? Which are not the internal, external pairs, okay? For example, we know this. We know that spleen and they're also, well, wait, here, let me frame this differently. So there are Biao-Li pairs means internal, external pairs. Let me just give you an example of that before I move on. What do you mean Biao-Li, right? Well, in Foundations 1, you learned that Biao-Li equals a Zhang Fu, right? Means internal and external is like the outside and inside of a garment. That's actually what Biao-Li means. It's like the internal lining versus the external of a garment, right? So spleen and stomach are the examples. Spleen and stomach equals earth element, internal and external. Correct? Makes sense, right? They both earth element, spleen and stomach. But in this pair, we have two different of the 6 channels, right? Organs related. So this pair represents the Tai-Yin Yang-Ming connection, right? Specifically in the middle jiao, right? Because there's another Tai-Yin Yang-Ming connection, but it's not this one, right? The other Tai-Yin Yang-Ming connection is lung large intestine, which happens in the metal element, right? So metal element, Biao-Li pair equals what? Lung and large intestine, right? So these are internal, external pair, same element. These are the same element equals metal element, right? However, they are not the same channel, right? Again. So this time, again, it's Tai Yin, Yang Ming. So Tai Yin and Yang Ming, we can think of it like a square, right? It's like we have the lung in one corner, relates with spleen in another corner, and lung and spleen both Tai Yin, right? But also lung relates with large intestine over here. And then the lung-large intestine connection is metal element. Well, we also have large intestine relate with stomach, right? Large intestine and stomach is a Yang Ming, right? But they're not the same element, just like spleen and lung are Tai Yin, but they're not the same element, right? So it's not the same idea to say in the Jui Yin, there's liver and there's pericardium, means that in the wood there's fire. It's actually, those two logics are different, okay? The logic of saying in the wood there's fire, actually in the wood there's all 5 elements, right? In the wood we'll have wood, in the wood we'll have water, in the wood we'll have fire, in the wood we'll have earth, right? In the wood we'll have, did I leave anything out? Water, fire, earth, metal, wind, no, sorry. They're all, anyway, the point is in one element, there's all 5 elements there, right? So the way we talk about that relationship is actually the relationship between the organs, right? Liver has a specific relationship with spleen. Liver has another relationship with kidney. Liver has another relationship with the lung. Liver has another relationship with the heart, right? So in the wood, there is all the other 5 elements, and actually in the wood also depends, each zang organ depends on all the other zang organs for function. You can't take one zang organ out and then the function remains the same, right? It's not possible. And this is not the same thing as like somebody gets their gallbladder removed or somebody gets their their uterus removed, or it's not the same thing because that's only the physical part, right? The shape gets affected, but the wood element is still there. Even if you take somebody's gallbladder out, they still have wood qi. It's just now their wood qi is affected by the loss of the gallbladder. So the reason why Jui Yin has liver and pericardium, right, is because liver and pericardium are a similar depth, okay? However, Jui Yin also relates with an element, okay? And that element is related with wood, okay? Pericardium is a fire organ, even though pericardium is connected with liver, right? But the way they're connected is not through their element. That's the thing to remember, is that the liver pericardium connection is actually not because of the elements. It's because of their depth, their layer. When we talk about the 6 channels versus 12 channels or versus the 5 zang, we're talking about layers of depth. Now, when we talk about 5 elements, we're no longer talking about layers of depth. We've changed context. Does that make sense? So the way that you framed it, saying, does it mean that pericardium is paired with liver means there's fire in the wood? We're mixing contexts. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I don't expect it to be totally clear because you'll need a lot more examples. You guys all need a lot more experience with the theory before it will be second nature. Right now, it's like you have a puzzle and you're trying to put the pieces together and you're going, does this piece go like this? Or does this piece go like this? Or like this or like that, right? And that's perfectly natural and that's normal and that's good. What that means is you're really critically thinking about what I'm saying and you're trying to relate it to what you've learned and understood, okay? mean, the other thing to remember is also the way that I talk about this. Again, there's a specific context even for the way I talk about it. It's very classically oriented. It's very Chinese, right? A lot of the material that I have, you simply will not find written in English anywhere, because I didn't learn these ideas from reading books in English. I learned these ideas from studying with Chinese teachers, okay? So there's a lot of information that I have to share that the only way to resource would be if you read Chinese. So some of the other English language resources, for example, there's a tremendous amount of material published on the 5-element style, right? The Worsley 5-element style, which is like a trademark. It's like he invented that. And he sourced his ideas from the classics, but his ideas are actually not the same as the classics, okay? So his 5E style is different than the 5 elements that exist in the classical texts. In the classical text, the 5 elements, again, more relate with the 5 zang organs, more relate with the different types of qi. The 5E Worsley style, he used the specific context of psychology, psychotherapy, emotions, and has related Western psychology with Chinese medicine through the model of the 5 elements, but in so doing, kind of created his own material. So a lot of the stuff that he talks about, it's referencing the classics, but it cannot be found in the classics, okay? And specifically, if you talk with the Chinese teachers, the way that they talk about the 5 elements is not the same as the 5E Worsley style. The 5E Worsley style is mostly a European style, right? Because Worsley was from Great Britain, and his ideas were basically how to use Chinese medicine to treat the trauma from World War II, which he believed was like mostly psychological and mostly emotional. So he thought that because Chinese medicine was this amazing system where obviously mind and body are connected, we could use Chinese medicine thinking to understand how emotions can affect the physical body. And while that is true, the context of that is all true, the specific way that he related it is not actually totally based in the classics. It's an effective system, and the 5E practitioners I have so much respect for. They get amazing results, but it's important to understand, again, there's different contexts here. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it there to say that English language resources, you have to remember that they always come from some place and it's already been translated, right? It's never directly from the Chinese. If it's in English, it means it's filtered through somebody's idea of what they thought they were talking about. But the Chinese is actually so broad and symbolic that as soon as you try to start putting it into like these specific contexts, it actually starts being diminished. So we'll talk a lot more about this, okay? We'll talk a lot more about this. But it's important to know that there's not just one 5 elements, right? There's the 5-element style, the Worsley style, which is different than the 5 elements as they're represented in the classics, even though he references the classics. It's not the exact same thing. And definitely you will find that Chinese teachers, Chinese practitioners generally don't use the 5 elements the way that 5E practitioners do. And it's because, reading the classics, it doesn't give that direct impression of 5E acupuncture. He created that system based on interpretation. Does that make sense? Anyway, we should get back into the notes. I can talk a lot. I can give you guys history lessons and philosophy lessons, but we need to focus on foundations, right? I actually, for many, many years, was the TA for history and philosophy, and I used to correct all Doc's papers. And probably when he's ready to be done teaching that class, I'll teach it. So we'll just see. So summer heat. This is why I had to explain all that, was because this first statement says summer heat is the chi of fire heat. And I needed to explain what that meant, right? Fire is the element, heat is the type of chi. And now we know there are two fires, which is why in the 6 chi, there's a heat and a summer heat. It also is the chi of the summer. Summertime relate to fire element, right? The Su Wen, the Yin, Wu Yun Xing Da Lun says, when in the skies there is heat, and on the earth there is fire, its nature is summer heat. So what this means is that summer heat type diseases, they happen in the later part of summer. Okay, July, August, in this time of year in California is when we get the fires, right? That's the time of year when summer heat is what will be the predominant evil chi in the environment, okay? Summer heat has specific symptoms associated with it. And if you go to different places in the world, summer heat is actually the type of chi that causes very serious febrile diseases, okay? For example, like, you know, like if you travel in certain parts of the world where there's like a rainy season, you know, especially in like Asia or in Africa, different parts of the world, there's the monsoon season, right? The monsoon season happens during this time, happens when the environment is as hot as it will ever be. It's very, very hot, but also damp, okay? So here's another part is because what we were talking about before, this ministerial fire and imperial fire, this heart fire chi Shaoyin imperial fire is more like pure heat, pure yang, right? Pure yang, the heart, the shun is the shun, right? The shun is pure yang, right? But the summer heat, the ministerial fire, is actually already yang mixing with yin, is the product of the transformation of essence, right? Water, right? Kidney, into heat and fire, okay? Which is, again, more related to the kidney yang, which travels through Xiao Yang and the gallbladder and Sanjiao. Okay. So summer heat has a yin and yang mixing quality. There's a lot of heat, but there's also some dampness because it happens at the end of summer, which is what? Going right up against autumn, right? Which is going right up against this yin. So summer heat is a transition from the full heat of the summer solstice, transforming into yin, okay? So it has two sides, a yang side and a yin side. Whereas heat and fire chi alone will have no yin component. It will have only yang. And the nature of this yang will be devastating. It will ruin the yin. It will consume the yin. It will cause yin deficiency, dryness, heat. Summer heat has a little bit of yin inside, has some dampness inside, okay? So like diseases that happen in the monsoon season in China, India, Africa, something like malaria, something like yellow fever, like something where the conditions change because suddenly there's so much rain and there was so much heat, and now there's like pestilence. Now there's like just illness in the air, right? Easily happens at this time. In Santa Cruz, what happens every like July and August? Stomach flus, right? People start getting stomach flus. People start getting vomiting and diarrhea, stomach aches. Happens every year. And this is also related to summer heat because summer heat, as we'll see, easily affects the food organs and digestion. Nature of summer heat. This means that the fire heat and summer heat have the same nature, and it's true. That's what we were just talking about. Diseases caused by summer heat evil have a distinct seasonal nature. They are only seen in the summer. Okay, I would highlight, memorize, underline that. They're only seen in the summer, whereas heat type diseases can be seen year round. Okay. The Su Wen Ruelun, the heat discussion, says, at the beginning of summer, there is warm disease. At the end of summer, there's summer heat disease. So again, yeah, I would memorize this too. So this is telling us the difference between heat and summer heat. Also has to do with the time of year that it happens, right? At the beginning, it's heat. At the end, it's summer heat. Okay. For the most part, summer heat disease refers to hot-natured diseases occurring in the summer. There are many names for these. For example, summer heat damage, yin summer heat, yang summer heat warmth, summer heat, summer heat damp, summer heat diarrhea, summer heat dysentery. See, this is kind of what usually happens in Santa Cruz, is something like this damp diarrhea, dysentery, because we tend to have a lot of damp chi in the environment in Santa Cruz. Summer heat reversal, summer heat stroke, summer heat tetany, summer heat wind, summer heat consumption, etc. Here, summer heat warmth. So what we're going to talk about and what I'm going to ask you to memorize is the signs and symptoms related to these. Summer heat warmth, summer heat damp complicated by cold, and summer heat stroke, because those are the most commonly found forms of summer heat in the developed world, okay? Summer heat's typically much worse in the third world, wherever the conditions are less clean, because think about it, right? So there's all this heat during the summer, which is all like this metabolic activity, right? But also the heat makes dry. So when people throw their waste out, in the past, they used to throw their waste out, right? And there were irrigation canals, which would be containing waste. When the heat of the summertime would dry all the water up, this stuff would all become sludgy, right? The irrigation canals will all dry up and you have all this disgusting filth in the irrigation canals. But then suddenly the monsoons hit. Now they all fill up with water, and that water starts overflowing, which washes the waste everywhere, right? So now you've got all kinds of diseases being contracted because basic conditions of living are not sanitary. Why? Because a combination of all this heat and then all this rain at the same time made a bunch of disease everywhere, right? And so in the past, we have all these different kinds of summer heat diseases. You look at all the names. But in the developed world, we don't see as much summer heat maybe as we used to. Summer heat used to be much more fatal. It's not as fatal now. The worst things that happen are some dysentery, maybe heat stroke, or somebody gets too hot and then they drink too much cold stuff. So they have an exterior heat with interior cold, right? But these are the ones we're going to focus on. Summer heat warmth, summer heat damp complicated by cold, and summer heat stroke. So here they are. Here's all the qualities of summer heat. Summer heat is a yang evil, right? Inflamed heat upbears and scatters easily, damaging the fluids and consumes the qi. Okay? So when the yang is in excess, the heat, right? Heat will cause reckless movement. Heat will cause over-transformation. Heat will lead to a relative yin deficiency over time. In the course of a febrile disease, in the course of an exterior disease or some kind of six evil chi scenario where it's like some wind, upper respiratory invasion turns into some kind of febrile disease. If the person has a lot of heat, then they'll be sweating a lot. And the more they sweat, the more deficient they become, right? Because you guys remember from Foundations 1, body fluids and chi, they're basically interchangeable, right? It takes chi to produce body fluids, but we also need to steam body fluids in order to produce chi. So they relate to each other yin yang, body fluids and chi, right? It's like when we exercise, right? Exercise helps us transform chi, but also makes us sweat, right? And the sweating that happens from exercise is actually a good thing in moderation. We don't want a lot of sweating from exercise. That will cause deficiency. But you're outside, you know, moving around, doing your qigong, right? Swinging around, and you just have a little bit of sweat on your skin. It's a very good thing because that means that internally you're steaming the qi outwards, right? But if you have a big fever and you're sweating all the time for days and days and days, maybe months, over time that can become fatal, right? So summer heat is a yang evil. Inflamed heat upbears, scatters, easily damages fluids, and consumes qi, okay? The thing about learning Chinese medicine, we can't read anything fast. And we also cannot assume that we know what we're reading when we read it. We have to read everything slow. We have to think about it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Then it finally starts to percolate in, right? Because you read it the first time, okay, summer heat easily damages fluid, consumes qi, whatever. What does that mean? You know, well, what that means is somebody had a fever, a high fever, for maybe weeks or months. And the sweating from that high fever has left them deficient, maybe even emaciated, and completely their physiology devastated. They're in huge yin deficiency, huge body fluids deficiency, right? We don't see these kind of things in the modern era as much because somebody with that kind of disease would be hospitalized, they would get an IV, and they would never become body fluids deficient. But in the past, this was very, very common. In fact, this was a common cause of death, would be loss of body fluids, right, from oversweating from febrile disease. They're often simultaneously accompanied by damp because the time of year, right? Characteristics of the disease caused by summer heat are the arisal of diseases often manifest with exuberant hyperactivity of yang heat, such as fever, sweat, vexation, and thirst, etc. Right? These are all signs that the yang qi is too much, exuberant, right? Fever, sweating, vexation, right? When the blood becomes hot, the hun and the shun become vexed, right? The hun and the shun want the blood to be cool. Always we want the qi to be warm and the blood to be cool, right? This is the same as we want the kidney warm, but the heart cool. Heart descending, kidney ascending, the shun calm, the ministerial fire strong, right? We don't want the shun erratic and the ministerial fire weak. That'd be like somebody who's very anxious or nervous and has a very cold body, right? We want it the opposite. We want the body warm, the ministerial fire is going up, the shun calm, the mind, the heart calm, the heart's going down. Does that all make sense to you guys? Fire should descend, water should ascend, but pathologically, fire will ascend. Pathologically, water will descend, okay? So fever, sweat, vexation, thirst. These are all indications that the yang qi is not descended. The yang qi is getting too active, going crazy. In addition, it's often combined with signs of damp or qi vacuity. The qi vacuity comes later. Okay, the qi vacuity comes as a result from oversweating, from too much febrile disease. Okay. Here are the patterns. All right. So you're going to need to memorize summer heat warmth, signs and symptoms, especially. You're going to need to memorize summer heat damp, the signs and symptoms especially. Then summer heat damp encumbering the middle burner. Summer heat damp filling the 3 burners. And summer heat damp complicated by cold, okay? So I'm just going to write that down. And we're going to start, but what I want, so we'll read through it. We only have 2 more minutes before I have to let you go because you all need to eat lunch and relax and move around so you can be ready for diagnosis 1, right? But I'm going to write this down so that you will, so you'll know specifically what I want you to focus on for next week. Okay, what I want you to focus on for next week is memorize and read signs and symptoms of these patterns in summer heat, okay? Summer heat warms, which just means a summer heat type pathogen that's causing heat in the body. Okay. Sometimes you have to decode dungese, right? It's a little too literal. Summer heat, damp. Okay, means it's a summer heat type pathogen that is giving some damp signs and symptoms. Summer heat, damp, encumbering and obstructing the middle. So this is when the dampness related to the summer heat chooses the specific location of the middle burner to obstruct. Guess what? There's going to be like vomiting and diarrhea in that one, right? You can imagine. Spleen, stomach affected. Okay, summer heat, damp, filling the 3 burners. See how the summer heat tends to show with damp, like I said before? Remember when we talked about up here? Summer heat is yin and yang mixing. So it's the water and fire mixing. So this heat has some damp inside. The yin and yang together. Summer heat, damp fills the 3 burners. Okay, then the final one I need you to memorize. Summer heat, damp, complicated by cold, right? Summer heat, damp, complicated by cold, right? The summer heat, damp condition can obstruct because damp obstructs, but this damp obstruction can lead to cold, even though the origin of disease was heat. Yes, that's why I need you to memorize this, is because you'll begin to see that the logic here is not simple, right? And that's why we have to master the basics, right? If we don't master the basics, then as it gets more complex, we'll get very confused. You guys are just in the beginning and you're all doing a really good job. It's now 12:31. I need to let you all go, okay, for your lunch break. I'm going to send you this document that I've been keeping track of. Here we have 6 pages worth of notes just from today's lecture. Please reread these notes, right? Try and remember what we talked about. Relate it to the information that I've given you in our main document, Foundations to 6 Evils A, right? There's a 6 Evils B, as you can tell. Once we get done with summer heat, I have to give you the next document. And then I also want you to read and review both Giovanni's talking about summer heat, which is very small, as well as Dung. Okay? Everyone have a great lunch. Those of you that I'll be seeing in about an hour, I look forward to seeing you. Make sure you eat and relax. Clear your mind. Don't think about Chinese medicine. Breathe deep. Walk about 100 steps. And I'll see you all in about an hour, okay? Bye.